All right. Sounds all right. Cool. Was getting a little echo there for a second, but actually, I still get it a little bit. Somebody have the YouTube video on. But in any case, I am joined by current affairs editor Nathan J. Robinson, and also by debater and writer and friend of the show Brent Lengel, and I want to get right to this pretty quickly for a couple of reasons. One is I believe Nathan is actually in the middle of putting together the new issue of current affairs, so
True.
I don't want to take.
I got about another day's work, and then we'll have another beautiful print issue off to the press.
Nice. And I have I know Brent has commitments coming up. He's getting ready for, and I've been. And this is like my one, showing my face on YouTube, because otherwise I've been doing the Eye of the Tiger montage, like training video for Saturday.
Wait, what's Saturday? Wait, are you debating?
Yes, on Saturday at the Beacon Theater in New York, minds.festival.com. Anybody wants to pick up a ticket? I'm doing by far the strangest debate of my life, I think, so far. The three other people who are going to be on the stage for my panel, there are like a couple other panels earlier in the night. There's one with Cordell West and Coleman Hughes and Margaret Kimberly, I think. There's one with like Destiny and a bunch of right-wingers I'm not really familiar with. And then the last one of the evening, I was actually telling this to Megan Day a couple days ago on the phone, and she was like this, and she told me it sounded like I was describing a dream. And all the people who are in it, it is going to be Tim Pool, James O'Keefe, and former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. So that should be interesting.
Oh my god!
So
yeah, that's gonna be nuts. I'm looking forward to it. I know Tim from Occupy, so.
Interesting. Well, there's actually been a thriving, I don't know what you would call this, but back and forth in the replies to, I'd done this little video about why I was doing the debate and what I was hoping to get out of it. And in the replies, somebody said, oh, tell Tim that people who he stayed with at Occupy are super disappointed with his character arc. And then he replied to that today. I mean, this was all like a week ago, but he replied to it today to be like, that's a lie. I still know all those people. And they were like, no, dude, you stayed at my couch, right? And he's like, no, I didn't. And then like the guy's like tagging his girlfriend, did this guy not stay on our couch? I think he did. So there's some he said, she said going on there. But make of that what you will. But yeah, it should be.
He never stayed on my couch, for the record.
Fair enough. Yeah, I actually don't think of. Oh, you were saying?
Hey, well, good luck. It sounds like it will be chaotic. I just wanted to mention, did you see Peterson squirming out of another effort to get him to debate?
I did.
Yeah, what happened this time?
Who
this time?
He just tweeted the Prager thing about, the left won't debate us, and he said, oh, how cowardly. So
yes, I did actually. We did a whole little segment about this on Monday, that because he had back in, what was it, like December, he'd expressed an interest in debating Nathan.
He said he'd do it anytime. He said he'd talk to me anytime to explain his maps of meaning to me. And then I replied, and I said, good, let's set it up. And I emailed several times his publicity people, and no reply. And Jordan Peterson has now turned off his replies, I think, as of yesterday. So no one can call him a hypocrite anymore.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
It'll happen one of these days. James will get him onto modern day debate, and he will be mine.
Well, he had, we'll see. I mean, the Nathan thing is interesting because it's his idea, right? I mean, he said, like, because he was responding to somebody, you know, he's got this whole thing. Nathan wrote this article about him back in 2018. You know, the intellectual we deserve, and I think it's what it's called. And they have, and you know, which I think has clearly gotten under his skin over the years, right? You know, there's a there's a video that we watched a while ago where he somebody mentions that article, and he makes it clear that he knows what they're talking about. And then in like November, somebody referenced Nathan's article, and you know, Jordan flips out, as he sometimes is prone to do on Twitter, and said, "Look, Bucko, just because you don't understand, you know, these diagrams and maps of meaning, which for anybody who's flipped through that book, it is just a smorgasbord of lunacy." But
it's incredible. It's incredible.
And just because you don't understand them, that doesn't make them gibberish. You know, Mr. Robinson, I'd be happy anytime, any place, you know, we can talk about this. And he even brings it up again, I think, after that. And then you reply, "Sure, sounds good. Here's my email address. Let's set it up." And then nothing. And then I think I actually remember talking to you about this in like December and being like, you know, you should like prod them on that, right? Let's make this happen.
I did. Nothing.
Yeah. Well, I saw you posted the screenshots of the email you sent them in December, right? You know, it'd been like a few weeks already and nothing from them, and then the follow up in January, being like, "So we're doing this, or what's?" I still haven't
heard from them. So
yeah. I was supposed to do the same thing with Charlie Kirk. I was going to go on and debate, and they told me it was going to be March. And that didn't happen. Hoping still to do it, because you know I'd love to lock horns with him. But
it is interesting that he's back to that. Like, he has done a couple of these recently. I have to say, I was, you know, I mean, I really liked it, because for several months there were exactly 3 episodes of Debate Night with Charlie Kirk, and I was number 3. You know, but yeah, he has gone back to it. I think he did something with Brianna Joy Gray, and you know, there have been a couple things, I think, but you know, good for him for doing it, at least. That was actually my final comment to him at the end of the night. That was it was sort of like a nice thing to say, but also kind of I think not very subtle dig at a lot of other people, you know, that I appreciate that, you know, he's one of the old conservatives who actually do this.
No, it's true. And to sort of get us to the subject of, or to the main event of tonight, I mean, one of the reasons I think it's important to keep goading Peterson is that Peterson's comment, yes, Charles, it was the Mountbank's comment that he made, this was in response to Dennis Prager saying the left won't debate us, and Jordan Peterson called them cowards and Mountbacks or whatever. And I think it's very, very important that we make clear that the left, you know, this is something you and I have argued over and over, Ben, is that the left is perfectly willing to debate, and that is in fact a lot of conservatives who actually use the word debate and use the word arguments, but they're not really interested in a serious face-to-face discussion of ideas. And one reason for that is when they are confronted with leftist arguments, often it doesn't go very well for them when they're confronted with actual leftists, right? Not liberals, leftists, because they don't have good responses. And Charlie Kirk didn't have good responses to you. And as we will see tonight, Lindsey Graham does not have good responses to Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, well, that is as good an intro as any. This is, this is a really interesting. I don't want to give anything away, but I think that I think that this is I think that this is Bernie at his best. That this and actually just very, you know, I mean, I saw, you know, I actually think I saw you say on Twitter, maybe half jokingly, but you know, I think it's correct, right? That it's like, having seen this erases my doubts about, you know, Bernie 2024, because this is you know, he's so sharp, right? I mean, like this is, you know, and he's so high energy. I mean, this is great. I mean, this is what you wanted. This is exactly, I think, what you want to see in a debate with Donald Trump, or I don't know, what's the other ghoul, DeSantis now, if, in like a general election debate, in fall 2024.
With regard to like debates with the right, it's always kind of been that they, like just how anarcho-capitalists only have arguments against tankies. They don't actually have arguments against like actual anarchists. The right, oftentimes they just have arguments against liberals, and they rely on, I guess, their audience just lumping all liberals and leftists together, which, as we know, is ridiculous. And this is why they get into situations like this.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's right. And I also think there are some more specific. Yeah, I mean, I think that is correct. I also think there are some more specific reasons that'll kind of come out as we actually see what Bernie does there, where you can see why this certainly doesn't go well towards somebody who's handling it like Bernie does here. I should also actually mention that we really will get to the debate, because we got to get this started. That I think that her presentation is very different, obviously, right? But I think anybody who watched Crystal Ball on Bill Maher last Friday, right? I think that like the substance of some of what she was doing was very similar to this, right? I mean, like, obviously, it's the sort of I mean, she's like a journalist, and that's what she sounds like, not a sort of grandfather rabble-rouser, right? But I think some of the substance, was similar, which I'm actually in the middle of writing something for Current Affairs about. But we should start, so let's do that.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
Here this probably feels like home.
This
the
is
well
awesome.
of the Senate. We agreed to do a coin toss.
Okay.
Very official. To start this off, just to show you the coin. This is heads. This is the Statue of Liberty. And then on the back side is tails right here. Senator Sanders, you get to call it in the air, since this is home field advantage.
Absolutely.
For you. All right.
Heads.
It is heads. Senator Sanders, you get to choose whether you go first or Senator Graham goes first.
I'll go first.
Senator Sanders, the floor is yours.
Well, let me thank the Kennedy Institute for hosting the event, Fox News for broadcasting it, and my colleague Lindsey Graham for being here with me. I am the longest serving independent in the history of the United States Congress. What I'm going to tell you today is not something that you hear very often on Fox or CNN or ABC or the Washington Post, or in fact in the halls of Congress. What I'm going to tell you is that the working class and the middle class of this country are in serious trouble. We are moving toward an oligarchic form of society where a small number of billionaires not only have extraordinary wealth, they have extraordinary political power. We are living at a time when half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck in the wealthiest country on earth, when 70 million Americans have no health insurance or are underinsured, when we have a starvation minimum wage at the federal level of $7.25 an hour, where half of the elderly workers, older workers in this country, have nothing in the bank as they fear retirement. What I believe is that now is the time not to defend the establishment, which is doing phenomenally well, when you have two people on top in America who own more wealth than the bottom 40%. Two people, top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92%. CEOs of major corporations today are making 350 times more than their workers, and we have more income and wealth inequality than any time in American history. Now is the time for the American people to stand up, make it clear that enough is enough and that we need a government that starts representing all of our people, not just wealthy campaign contributors. What does that mean? It means that we have to end a corrupt political system in which big money buys elections. It means that we have to end a very unfair tax system in which billionaires in a given year don't pay a nickel in federal taxes. It means we have to raise the federal minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. It means that we have to join every other major country on earth in understanding that healthcare is a human right, not a privilege, and stop spending twice as much per capita on healthcare to enrich the drug companies and the insurance companies. It means that Medicare is going to have to negotiate prescription drug prices so that we can lower the cost of prescription drugs by 50%. It means that we cannot continue to be the only major country on earth not to have paid family and medical leave. It means that we have to restore the $300 tax credit so that we are not continuing to be a nation which has one of the highest rates of childhood poverty in the United States. It means that we have to expand Medicare to cover dental care, hearing aids, and eyeglasses so that elderly people in this country can live out their remaining years in dignity. And it means, among other things, that we cannot continue to ignore climate change, which is an existential threat to this planet. And obviously, given the tragedies that we have faced in the last month in terms of guns, we need serious and real gun safety legislation. Bottom line, let's create a government that works for all of us, not just the people on top. Thank you.
Senator Graham.
Well, thank you very much. This is an awesome place. If you get in Boston, come see the place. I want to thank, we're here to honor Ted and Orrin. Ted Kennedy, Orrin Hatcher were great friends. They fought like tigers, but they could work together. And I have a different take on things than Bernie, and we'll get through that here in a minute. But I like Bernie. Bernie's own message. I hear this every day, all the time, and he believes it. But I just want to remind you that the Democrats are in charge. After hearing Bernie talk, you would believe we're building a wall to keep people in, not out. Things are tough, but they're going to get better, right? And socialism is not the answer to all these problems. So I just want to remind you a little bit about where we're at. The Democrats have the House, the Senate, and the White House. All these problems that were talked about, they could change or fix if they could. Their agenda is not working. So here's what I want to tell you. Vote Republican in 2022. Do yourself a favor and ask yourself the following question. Am I better off today than I was 2 years ago? And if you are in a world of hurt 2 years ago, because most people are not better off today. And there's a reason. Policy matters. You know, we're all Americans. He loves his vision of America. I disagree with it, but I admire his passion. But here's where we stand. 8.6% inflation, the highest in 40 years. When you go to the grocery store for $100, you're lucky if you get a bag. Go fill up your car. You got to take a mortgage out to fill up your car. What's happened here? The policies that are being pursued by my Democratic colleagues are not working. The average American is in a world of hurt. 2 million people will come across the border illegally this year. The highest in the history of the country. In December 2020, we had the lowest illegal immigrant crossings in 40 years. In April of this year, it was over 250,000. This is dangerous and it's irresponsible. And you're paying almost $800 a day to pay for an illegal immigrant child in U.S. custody. It's breaking the bank, and it's just a matter of time till some terrorist comes over here and kills us all, if they could, because they don't see Bernie and I much different. We're Americans in their eyes. So we've got a broken border. We need to fix it. Crime is rampant. This defund the police effort that you've been leading and others has taken a toll. I was picked up at the airport by a couple of cops, and they patted me on the back. I thought I was in South Carolina. The bottom line is it's a tough time to be a cop now. Who wants to go into law enforcement? It's time to let the cops know you're not the problem, the criminal's the problem. So we got a lot of problems. Vote Republican and stop this madness. This is the most radical, costly agenda in modern American history. It's not working for you, and it needs to change. And they want to do more if they could. Vote Republican to stop packing the Supreme Court. We've worked hard to create a conservative majority. They want to increase the number of people on the Supreme Court to make it liberal again. They want to federalize elections, doing away with the voter IDs and instituting ballot harvesting. They want to abolish the Electoral College so New York and California will pick the president in perpetuity. Bottom line, it can be better. In 2019, we had the lowest poverty rate in modern history. African-American families before COVID were having the highest income in the history of following statistics. Women were doing better. We had a secure border. The Arabs and the Israelis were working together. We had a country that was moving in the right direction. We had low gas prices and jobs were abundant. And along come COVID. We can get back to that pre-COVID America, but you're never going to get back unless you change leadership in this country in 2022.
Senator Sanders, your
Thoughts? You want to start us off, Nathan?
So a couple small things first that I noted the second time that I didn't notice at first. First, he says we worked hard to build a conservative majority on the Supreme Court. Now, usually they pretend that the court is not political. They say, the whole thing is judges are just umpires. No, it's not political. He just openly goes, no, we built a conservative majority. Like, we're just imposing Republican policies through the Supreme Court. The other thing I noticed was when he said you pay $800 a day to keep immigrant children in custody, which, a good way to not pay $800 a day to keep immigrant children in custody is to let them go. So it's kind of criticizing Joe Biden for keeping kids in cages. But the main thing here is that Bernie Sanders is arguing against Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is arguing against Joe Biden. And
yes.
Bernie's really, really effective here, but Bernie is undermined by the fact that Lindsey Graham tries to tie Bernie to the Democrats. The whole thing that comes up throughout the debate is Bernie will make a point about all the things that are wrong and all the things he wants to do to fix it. And then Lindsey Graham will say, well, the Democrats are in power. Look at their terrible policies. Look how shitty the country is. Look at all the things that are falling apart. Vote Republican. He says over and over, vote Republican. The problem is, of course, that Bernie can't say vote Democrat, but Lindsey Graham can say vote Republican. And so Bernie is kind of saddled, unfortunately, with the fact that, Bernie works very hard not to distance himself too much from Joe Biden. He likes Joe Biden. He doesn't want to throw Joe Biden under the bus. He doesn't want to explicitly say, well, I think the Democrats are terrible too. And because he doesn't do that, he gives Graham an opening to just throw Democratic policies at Bernie. And I think we'll see that Bernie has a little bit of a problem coming back against that because he doesn't want to go full-throated against the party.
Yeah. What I would say in this, a couple things jumped out to me. Because as soon as I saw him say that he likes Bernie, believes that Bernie believes this, but he's associated with the Democrats, that was what I thought he was. That was going to be the thrust of his argument. That Bernie wants to do this, but the Democrats won't let him. And that would have been an incredibly strong opening. But instead, I gotta say, I hate to make the comparison, but he's kind of reminding me of Mussolini in the fact that Mussolini had no arguments. He only had rhetoric. Because, Bernie is starting out a debate. He's pointing out specific problems that we need to fix. And Graham is just vote Republican. There's so much stuff in there that I couldn't respond to each and every one of these arguments, but a lot of them are not really arguments. It's much more sloganeering from what I can tell. And, that may work because people oftentimes don't catch that. But in this, it seems like Bernie is having a debate and Lindsey Graham is just trying to throw rhetoric and cliches at the audience and hoping that they will latch onto those.
Yeah, I think that I think one of the first things Nathan said was my main takeaway from Graham's opening, right? That he doesn't want to respond to Bernie, so he's responded to Joe Biden, right? I mean, like that's what he's doing, right? That there wasn't the word Democrats. In fact, neither the word Democrats nor the word Republicans showed up in Bernie's opening, right? He didn't say either of those things, right? He talked about the establishment, and
he identified himself as an independent right off the bat.
Yeah. So I think in a way, I mean, I think Nathan's right that it is going to be an issue throughout the debate that he Bernie can't really go full throatedly at Biden and the Democrats. But he is threading an interesting needle because he's also kind of going out of his way not to really identify himself with Biden and the Democrats, right? I mean, that I'm the longest serving independent, in U.S. Congress, right? And he just, again, it's never the Republican Party. It's just the establishment. And so Bernie's, Bernie's very simple, effective message in that opening was, lots of people are really badly suffering. We have this crazy level of economic inequality. Here are a bunch of social democratic policies that would alleviate that to some extent. We should do that instead of defending the establishment, is the phrase he used. And Graham's response was, honestly, there were like 3 or 4 sentences of that were actually responsive to that. Right? They were like, I'm sure Bernie believes what he believes, his vision of America. Terrorists, would make a distinction between us. These terrorists who are flooding.
Yeah, you're more likely to be killed by your own furniture in your house than by a terrorist. Like, you're more likely to be crushed by a falling armoire. But yeah, everybody's terrified of that.
Yeah, or I mean, at least Graham wants them to be. I mean, I don't know that terrorism really takes up as much space in the collective American psyche as it used to, which is a good thing. But then, the closest he actually came to responding to the sort of meat of what Bernie said is that one sentence: "The solution is socialism." It's like, okay, why not? Right? You can expand on that point a little bit, or is that just self-evident? I mean, it sort of seemed like he's giving a campaign speech for Republicans where you could just sort of throw out the word socialism, and that's kind of good enough.
There were a couple of points with Bernie. I love, and we were talking about Occupy earlier, and Bernie is using the 1% versus the 99%. I'm so happy to see that at least that framing has remained. When he talked about giving Medicare the right to negotiate, that's really, really important for solving the exact problem that he has. The reason Medicare can't negotiate right now is that they consider it price fixing. And they're like, well, there must be competition. So obviously this government, but it's insane to consider that price fixing. They absolutely should be able to negotiate with people. And then the last thing was when Lindsey Graham mentioned that cops in New York clapped him on the shoulder. Well, of course they did. They're freaking cops. And he even kind of went into that where he talked about defunding the police. Defunding the police is not about starving departments for resources to not be able to handle crime. It's about getting around the police union so that you can do necessary reforms like they did in Camden, New Jersey. They defunded, they eliminated it, they built it back up from scratch.
Well, that's also worth pointing out. Yeah, I mean, so that is one version of it, right? This sort of police reorganization plans. I do think defunding sometimes just means, we're going to move some money away from the police line of the municipal budget to other things to fund them more. Which whatever you think about that, I mean, I think that could be a good thing. I don't the biggest point I would just make is what's always missing whenever Lindsey Graham or anybody like him brings this up is that it hasn't actually happened hardly anywhere, right? I mean, police departments around the country have, by and large, actually have more money than they had in 2020. There are a couple of cities that cut the police budgets a little bit, and by and large, they've given it all back.
Mm-hmm. And where they did, like Camden, New Jersey, it's worked out phenomenally. Because once again, the police unions are so strong that they are unable, even if you get the right people elected who want to do these necessary police reforms, so officers don't, keep killing people, for instance, a lot of the time the elected officials can't do that because of the police union itself. So obviously you starve it of resources, build a new one up. You can deal with these problems. I guess my argument is the defund argument or the defund abolish argument is not as radical as it seems on the face, but Graham is counting on people not being educated, because I don't believe for a second he doesn't realize this. It's more it sounds bad and scary to the type of people that are going to be persuaded by simply vote Republican because maybe 2 years ago you weren't better off. Crime has been falling across the board for decades. It came up slightly. It's still way down from where it was in the 90s. And it's obviously an effect of COVID. But, Graham doesn't want to acknowledge any of that.
I would say, to be fair, that I think it's a rhetorical mistake to, I think sometimes the left falls into saying, well, if it's down from where it was a couple decades ago, that if it's like more than it was a few years ago, that's not a big deal, which I don't think is really how we would talk about anything else, right? If fewer people are uninsured than before Obamacare, but more people are uninsured now than 2019. We still think that's a big deal, right? Like, I think that I do think it's important to take street crime seriously because it's like a very real concern for a lot of working class people. But I also don't think we need to accept our enemy's solution to that problem. I think we can just say, like, there are a lot of things, like, I think a left-wing economic agenda would actually do a lot, to reduce crime. I mean, the point I always like to make with this is that, look, you don't have to like flash forward to fully automated luxury communism in the 23rd century, right? I mean, you could just say like Norway right now, 2022, right, has a vastly more humane and lenient criminal justice system than the United States does, but it also has a much lower rate of violent crime, right? You can do both if you're willing to also, implement a lefty economic agenda. But what were you going to say, Nathan?
Oh, well, yeah, I think that's right. In fact, I've been trying to write an article for a little while on how the left should talk about crime, because the fact is that, we're actually better on reducing violence. and we should lead on this. We shouldn't be on the defense on this, because throwing people in cages and brutalizing them and then letting them out on the street is a terrible approach to try to stop violent crime. We actually believe in it. We actually believe in meaningful public safety. But the thing is, Bernie's actually not a defund guy. Again, he's arguing. Lindsey Graham is not arguing against Bernie Sanders here. And what we see here is an example of why some of us have been since 2016 arguing that Bernie Sanders has a very, very effective way of talking that could win a national election. The reason that we have been arguing on the left that Bernie Sanders should have been nominated in 2016 and 2020 is precisely what you see here, because what we've been saying is you get someone with that message on the stage with a Republican, and the Republican, it's very clear, has no arguments against Bernie Sanders' politics. They have arguments against the terrible Democrats that we all hate, but they have no arguments against Bernie Sanders. That's why he's an incredible political weapon that if the Democrats were smart, they'd understand the power of Bernie's message.
Yeah, that's a huge if, but I get you on that. Ben, you brought up Norway. And I always thought Norway, one of the great things about that is that they actually nationalized their oil. And then they took the money from nationalizing the oil, and instead of handing it out to, the richest and most powerful people, they put it into a portfolio and invested in markets all across the world. So even if oil crashes, they are essentially kind of crash and recession proof. And as a result of this, they've actually given every single Norwegian citizen has the equivalent, when they are born, they have the equivalent of a 250,000 plus trust fund in their name. And this is a direct result of social democrat policies like nationalizing the oil industry. So, Lindsey Graham would, of course, say socialism isn't the answer here. Obviously it is. At least social democratic policies like that. Like we have actual evidence that these policies work. They do. He just doesn't want to admit it.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is also something that sometimes right wingers like to bring up in a really like shallow, stupid way, which is like the my conversation with Charlie Kirk. There's a point where he's like, "Oh, you like Norway, right?" It's like, okay, I know exactly where he's going with this, right? So, well, where they get all that money to do all that stuff, right? And I was like, well, doing something you wouldn't support, which was nationalizing the oil industry, right? I mean, you don't want to do that here, and I absolutely think that we should be transitioning to other energy sources, but I think the two actually go hand in hand. I think that and I think especially right now, right, that if you really want to, I mean, like, I think having a windfall profit tax in the oil industry and using that to subsidize, gas prices is points in the right direction. But like, I really think what we should do is nationalize the oil industry so it could be, it can be run in its final years in the public interest, before being efficiently euthanized, and as we transition to greener energy. But we should get back to this. Bernie's response here is very good, so let's watch that.
Response.
Just one thing, as a matter of fact, I never called for the defunding of the police.
I stand corrected.
What I do believe in is a former mayor, as a matter of fact, who worked very well with our police department, is we need community-based policing that reflects the people in those communities, that we have to fight racism in every way that we can. But I've never called for defunding the police. Now, it's interesting to hear Senator Graham speak, because other than the partisan rhetoric, what you don't hear him talking about are, in fact, the most important issues facing this country. That's what the establishment does. And Lindsey is a very good and effective representative of the establishment. Does Lindsey have a concern that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people? That some 60,000 people a year die because they don't get to a doctor on time? I didn't hear much about that in that opening statement. Lindsey care that we have the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, and that the pharmaceutical industry right now has 1,500 paid lobbyists in Washington, D.C. to make sure that in some cases we pay 10 times more for the medicine that we need? Did Lindsey talk about the fact that we have in South Carolina and all over this country tens of millions of workers working for starvation wages? Did he talk about a corrupt political system in which billionaires today can start a super PAC? And I guess you have some familiarity with super PACs. They help fund your campaign. Who can spend unlimited amounts of money to elect candidates. You have the absurd situation where super PACs frequently spend more money than the candidates themselves. I didn't hear Lindsey talk about the crisis of climate change or the reality that scientists are telling us. It's not Bernie Sanders, Lindsey. This is what the best scientists in the world are telling us. We don't get our act together. The planet we're going to be leaving our kids and future generations will be becoming increasingly uninhabitable. We're talking about great cities like Charleston, South Carolina. You're aware of that. Neighborhoods flooding. There are people who are thinking that not only Charleston, but Miami, New York City will be half underwater by the end of the century. You got to talk about that. You got to talk about income and wealth inequality. Do you have a concern that two people own more wealth than the bottom 42%? Do you have a concern in terms of corporate concentration of ownership? You got 3 Wall Street firms now, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, who control $20 trillion in assets. They control hundreds and hundreds of corporations throughout this country. Bottom line is we are moving toward oligarchy. And if we don't stand up and say that we need a government that represents working people and the middle class, I worry very much about the future of this country. And I hope you'll speak to some of those issues.
So I've been trying to do bigger chunks, before we pause, but I think we do have to pause on that for a second, just because it was such a nice response. Brent, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, that opening was an absolute thing of beauty. And this really goes to show, like, Bernie knows what he's talking about. As he's taking this debate, it's fact, 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 fact. He's laying out a strategy that is not based upon simple rhetoric, as we saw out of Lindsey. And I really think, like, Bernie as a figure has been really important to me personally, because ever since I, became like a lefty kind of occupier, like, me and my dad had a more contentious relationship. I love my dad, but he's a lifelong Republican, has never voted for a Democrat in his life. And I still remember in 2016, before when it looked like Bernie was going to get it, he actually told me, it was at my brother's wedding, he said, I am going to vote for Bernie Sanders. And my dad, you know, he's done pretty well for himself. He's a doctor, but he comes from a working class background, has very much working class values. And I guarantee you, there are millions and millions of people like my dad who would absolutely come on to a Bernie campaign. The thing that's holding back the Bernie campaign is the leadership of the Democratic Party. And for instance, responses like, I believe it was Chris Matthews when Bernie was ahead before he got squeezed out this latest time, where he was talking like he thought there would be like Maoist show trials in Central Park. You know, there's a hysteria about Bernie that I still haven't really understood, because if you like just sit there and listen to the man for 5 minutes, he clearly knows what he's talking about. He clearly cares, and he has a real plan to fix these issues.
Yeah. I mean, Bernie is just great at staying on message. He's the best, probably the best politician in the country at doing this, right? Where at the beginning, what does he do? At the beginning of that response, well, he takes the defund thing and neutralizes that, but very quickly by just saying that he's never used that language, and then it's back to the issues, right? Back to hitting the points. You know, there was, I think. You know, but what was Barack Obama said that, you know, when you ask Bernie how he is, his answer is, we got to save Social Security, right? Like, you know, like Bernie, everything he says is about the core items on his agenda. But the other nice thing, it's nice to watch him unleash because one of the frustrating things about Bernie sometimes could be that you wish he'd be a little more aggressive with the other side, and he made it personal, right? I mean, he said, Lindsey, you're a representative of the establishment, and a good one. And weirdly, Lindsey Graham nodded at that. So, yeah, yes, like it was a compliment or something. But you know, he made it personal. He said that, you know, the super PACs fund your campaign, right? He was vicious, and that's what you like to see from Bernie. You like to see when the teeth come out. It's very, very satisfying.
Yeah, I liked the fact that he did point out the super PAC money behind Lindsey. I mean,
yes.
It's a
nice little touch, right? I mean, he's being very conservative with those touches, but whatever there is, makes it count.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember protesting the Democratic National Convention, I believe, back in 2012. And we also, when we occupied D.C., we got on the steps of the Supreme Court. And both times we chanted, money is not speech. Because, you know, that's really what this came from, the ruling that these super PACs can spend infinite money. You know, it comes from the idea of corporate personhood. You know, it's these things that the right has snuck in. And just like the issue with us not being able to negotiate for Medicare with drug providers because it's price fixing, they've taken liberal ideas that go back to the founding of this country, and they have bent them in a corporatist direction, a corporatocracy specifically. And, you know, Bernie is one of the few people speaking out about that, but I think everybody sees it, whether you're on the right or the left. And I think this is part of that is why Trump had such appeal, because he seemed like he was going to do something, but unlike Bernie, you know, Trump, he was never going to do it.
It was always total nonsense. You know, I mean, other than, you know, the sort of heightened level of cruelty towards immigrants and and some of the like erratic zigzags on foreign policy, I mean, Trump largely governed the way that Mitt Romney would have. You know, that there's, you know, that's basically the administration we got. I did find, by the way, Brett, the quote you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So this is. It's either just before or just after Bernie wins the Nevada caucus, but it's like while Bernie was the front runner, and Chris Matthews is really freaking out about it. And he says, you know, I have my own views of the word socialist, and I'll be glad to tell them, share them with you in private. They go back to the early, and then he just says it on TV, right? They go back to the early 1950s. I have an attitude about them. I remember the Cold War. I have an attitude towards Castro, and I believe if Castro and the Reds had won the Cold War, Castro and the Reds, I like that. Castro and the Reds had won the Cold War, there would have been executions in Central Park, and I might have been one of the ones executed, and certain other people would be there cheerleading. So I have a problem with people who took the other side. I don't know who Bernie supports over the years. I don't know what he means by socialism. 1 week it's Denmark. We're going to be like Denmark. the MSNBC host said, lapse into impression to Sanders' Brooklyn accents. Oh, that's harmless. He's clear. So a couple sentences later, he's clearly the Denmark category. Chris Hayes gently pointed out, is he? Matthews shot back. So there you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I mean, I do think there's a reason why, you know, yeah, Brent's dad would have voted for Bernie. There's a reason why, like, I don't know. I remember in like summer 2016, right? The summer 2016, I was in a friend's wedding. It was like a, you know, destination kind of wedding sort of thing. And like one of the nights, you know, leading up to it, I was, you know, it was one of those things where you're like hanging out with people because there are like a lot of people gathered there for the wedding who, you know, you wouldn't normally necessarily, you know or spend time with. And so it was there was like an older family member of the bride I think I was there with, and, you know, and he was, you know, and he was like, you know, hanging out and, you know, getting high with all of the, you know, like graduate students, their 20s there, right? And he had and he just sort of casually busted out one day. I was like, yeah, no, I think I'll vote for, like, you know, maybe Bernie or the Donald, you know, well, either of them, right? You know, like that was his thing. But I think there are a lot of people like that, right? And I think that the you know, because
really quickly, like Donald Trump, one of the things he does very well is he's able to copy a sort of working class swagger to the way that he talks, and you know, it's obviously it's completely fake coming from him. Bernie actually did come up like through the working class. So a lot of people who are, you know, working class people will see that and think, oh, he's one of us. The difference is Bernie is actually one of us.
Well, and I mean, Trump did. I mean, he did go out his way. He talked all the time about the free trade agreements on the campaign trail. You know, he had, you know, there, you know, he would frequently at least talk about like corruption, and, you know, there was a vibe that he was trying very hard to give out, even if there was never any even hypothetical policy substance to it, right? But there was a vibe he was trying to give out that, like, he's a opponent of entrenched interests, and the establishment of all kinds doesn't like him and all that stuff. And, you know, that was enough to convince some people, you know, like that's and I think that you know, and I think Bernie Sanders, like, yeah, the fact that what he just did in that statement, right? He doesn't say, oh, Lindsey is a representative of the Republican Party, or he's a representative of people who are conservative, right? You know, he says he's a representative of the establishment. And, you know, and then, you know, Graham's like, oh, thank you. You know, like he's, I think Bernie knows what he's doing. I think that opening was perfect, but we should get back to it.
Well, I'll be glad to speak to that campaign. I raised $112 million. The average donation was about $40, lindseygraham.com. The bottom line is the America that we all seek to achieve, where everybody can do well, is not going to happen unless things change. You haven't called for defunding the police. Will you do me a favor and say publicly today, those who are calling for defunding the police, stop, because you're hurting the country. It's people in your party, the liberal wing, I don't know what you call these folks, but they believe the cops are the problem. You say you've never done it, but people in your party are doing it all the time. At the end of the day, I believe climate change is real, but that's no reason to destroy the fossil fuel industry in this country. We're moving to electric cars, but that's going to be 2034, 2035. Your party has made us miserable when it comes to filling up our tank. Your party took 10 million acres out of production. You closed the ability to produce oil and gas in Anwar, and you wonder why it costs so much to fill up your car. What the hell's happened in the last 2 years? Their policies. You think this is an accident? I'd like to lower healthcare costs, but I'm not going to take away your private coverage. Senator Sanders has a bill called Medicare for All. Bring it to the floor for a vote. I'm begging you to take Medicare for All and bring it to the floor of the Senate, which looks just like this, and let's vote. The reason it won't pass is because you're going to take private health care away from 200 million Americans, put us all under the government umbrella. It's going to cost about $40 trillion. In 2034, we'll be spending as much to maintain Medicare for all as we do for the entire federal government today. And people will have less. You get what the government gives you when they're ready to give it to you. So this idea of Medicare for all destroys private sector health care, and that is not the answer. Immigration. When are you going to fix the border? Y'all are in charge for 2 years. We've been telling you what you're doing doesn't work. I know you don't like Trump, but Trump got it right when it came to remain in Mexico. His policies secured our border. You've repealed all those policies. We're having more people come here illegally than exist in the state of Vermont. How easy would it be for some terrorist group to get into the middle of this human chaos? So I would ask you to focus on lowering gas prices, securing the border, and bringing law and order back to America. And the only way you're going to do that, Senator Sanders, is abandon the agenda that you've charted for America, because it is not working.
Well, let's talk about gas prices, because you're right. They are outrageously high in Vermont. They're now filled up the other day, $5.05 a gallon. Meanwhile, the major oil companies made $35 billion in the first quarter of this year. And at the end of the year, it is estimated they're going to give $88 billion in stock buybacks to their wealthy shareholders. So I do think we have to do something about the outrageously high price of gas. I think the president should bring the major oil companies in and tell them we're going to have a windfall profits tax on what they're doing in order to stop them from ripping off the American people. You know, the last time that oil prices were at $118 a barrel, which is what they are right now, roughly speaking, average gasoline prices at the pump were $3.83, not over $5 a gallon. So I think in the midst of what is going on in this world, and that is the war in Ukraine and Russia oil and the stopping of oil, I think what the oil companies are doing is taking advantage of that situation and raising prices to an outrageous level, which is hurting the American working family. But the issue goes beyond oil. The issue goes to healthcare. You talked about the cost of healthcare. I am sure you know that in the United States, Lindsey, we spend twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of any other country. While major countries like Canada, the UK, Germany manage to provide healthcare to all of their people. Why is that? Because they're not having oil companies, they're not having insurance companies ripping off the system. What we need to do right now is to take a deep breath, because this country, in fact, Lindsey Graham is right. We're in a lot of deep hurt. All over this country, Vermont, South Carolina, all over this country, people are hurting. But what we don't need right now is demagoguery. What we need is thoughtful solutions to the major crises that we face. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what we need is a government that represents all of us and not just wealthy, powerful, special interests. So that is what I'm working on. What I believe, you talk about, will Medicare pass on the floor of the Senate tomorrow? No, it will not. But the real question is not whether it passes or not, it's what the American people want. And you know what the American people do want? They do want Medicare for all. You talk about the joys and beauties of private insurance. Talk to the millions of workers who lost their private insurance during COVID. So I think it is time for the working families of this country to stand up, demand a government represents all, not just the few.
So I'm calling on Senator Schumer to bring.
Ben, you're muted.
All right, Nathan, you want to get us rolling here?
Well, it's not going to be the last time, I don't think, that Lindsey Graham uses that tactic of saying, I want you to bring it to the Senate floor for a vote. Once again, trying to suggest that, if the Democrats in the Senate vote something down, the American people don't want it. He keeps trying to say your people, your party, right? You, Bernie Sanders, you and the Democrats. Well, and you're too radical even for the Democrats. And he's, constantly trying to tie Bernie to the party. And Bernie's kind of stuck with this, right? Because Bernie says very briefly, yes, it won't pass in the Senate. But what he really needs to explain to the American people, right, is it won't pass in the Senate because they're all corporate Democrats, right? It won't pass in the Senate because the Democratic Party is terrible, right? So Lindsey Graham's kind of got him by doing this, because in order to explain why Medicare for All stands absolutely no chance in Congress, Bernie Sanders would have to explain that the Democratic Party is horrible. and he really is very, very reluctant to say the Democratic Party is absolutely horrible. I am the only sensible senator, even though that is true.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's trying to force him off topic yet again. You saw right at the beginning, he said that Bernie needed to denounce other members of the party, as if that has anything to do with the debate that's going on right here. But, that was a good, very sneaky move, and Bernie did not take the bait. There's also... Lindsey really just seemed to have like a very used car salesman energy. In fact, that's one of the first things I wrote down here. And I really love it that Bernie is continuing to do what Bernie does. Stay on topic. Don't let your opponent distract you. The other thing that there were a few, I don't know if people saw it because we went full screen, but like there were just a few things that Lindsey said that were just flat out lies. Like, if you guys look this up, just go on to PolitiFact. The idea that Biden has pumped less gas than Trump is just patently false. He's actually pumped more than So because does anybody really believe Joe Biden cares about the environment? No.
Yeah, I mean the sort of most superficially plausible versions of this. They'll talk about the Keystone Pipeline and stuff, but yeah, they hasn't. But there isn't. But yeah, the actual. It's one of the things Crystal pointed out on Bill Maher last week, that the actual supply of gas is at record levels, right? I mean, it's great, right?
Trump was having to sell off some of our strategic reserve to keep it from crashing during COVID, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and it's also, but I actually think Bernie handled that point really well, right? That he said, look, the last time that the actual price of a barrel of oil is whatever he said it was, right? Than it is right now. The average price of gas was whatever it was, $3.83, right? Not over $5. So clearly something else is going on here. And I also think that Bernie, just in terms of debate strategy, I think he handled this really well in his response, because Graham was kind of throwing 1,000 things at the board at once, right? Let's talk about defund the police, let's talk about immigration, and terrorism, and what
each
oil
of these
prices.
could have been its own debate in and of
Totally.
itself.
Yeah, and so what Bernie did without hesitation is he basically picked two of them, and they were the two that played to his strengths, right? That are that. What are his core issues, right? He's gonna talk about healthcare, of course, and he's gonna talk about the gas prices, because he has a really compelling narrative on those. And even if he hadn't had quite such a limited amount of time, I think that rather than trying to do a point by point response to every single thing that was thrown out and letting the most important stuff get lost, I think that's exactly what he should have done, right? Just be yeah, I mean, I think that was perfect. Just gas is too expensive. Let's talk about why, and let's talk about something we can do about it. Which, even if you did believe that insufficient supply had something to do with it, which I don't think the data bears out. I mean, that there wouldn't be, I mean, you could start drilling more now, and that wouldn't have any effect, right now. But here's something we can do right now. And yeah, let's talk about healthcare, because you're defending the private insurance industry has tried to do. I mean, Graham is just doing what all the Democrats besides Bernie did 2020, including Tulsi, by the way.
Well, yeah,
Which is,
people want to keep their private health care thing.
Yeah.
I think you're right on the money there. And like the thing is, so there was a period in my life, quite a while ago, that I actually was on Medicaid, like, which is supposed to be very bad compared to Medicare. But I'll tell you, I've had like health insurance from, top tier stuff from like CBS employee health insurance all the way down to, Medicare, or not Medicare, Medicaid. And I was actually shocked at how effective the Medicaid insurance was. Now, maybe that's based upon the state I was in, but at the same time, people have been told this boogeyman about these programs, that they don't work, that they're poor, that people want their private health care. Absolutely not. Because I'll say, even with the top tier health care, Medicaid beat it all in terms of like how much money I was actually having to expend for health care for myself and my family.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Jennifer and I were on Medicaid for a while in 2015, and I had the same experience. That it was fantastic, right? I mean, just like just in a cost sense, it was fantastic. The reason why Medicare is more popular than Medicaid, right? Is that with Medicaid, because it's not universal, there are doctors who won't take it, right? So you have to find one who will take Medicaid. But of course that's a problem that you don't have with Medicare for all, because everybody is on it, right? You take it or you go out of business. And it's also, by the way, why I have a problem with the Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Tulsi Gabbard, whoever else I'm forgetting about,
There's a lot of them.
Yeah. The Medicare for all who want it thing, right? Because it's like, okay, look, if you really meant it, that like everybody, could be on it, then sure, be a big improvement over the status quo. But also, I think it's also just fundamentally like, you have the Medicaid problem again, right? Which is that you have two-tiered healthcare, for people of means and for everybody else, right? That that you have, because you'll have like, the best, doctors, will hold out, right, for the higher payouts they'll get from private insurance, which is my problem with that. But like also, like, I just think this is a horrible losing tack, for conservatives and centrists, because it's like, yeah, you get a certain number of people not along with that, but like, are you really, like, how passionate do you really think anybody is going to be to like go to war for the fact that like it's really important to them that the financial entity that interfaces between them and their and their doctors and hospitals is Blue Cross Blue Shield, not Medicare?
Yeah, and it's really strange also, just like, because if everybody could be on even Medicaid, which across the board is believed to be the worst thing, like, the insurance that I had at one point was, it even had ridiculous stuff like 10 acupuncture treatments a year. But even with that, when I went to actually pay, when something went wrong in my life, or my wife's or my son had issues, like, I would be, oh my God, what is this going to cost me in copays? Medicaid doesn't have copays, and so like a lot of these programs, are actually really effective and could be built into something much more universal. And I think people would absolutely love that, compared to even some of the best healthcare in the nation. I'm sorry, and I'm making a mistake here, and I just realized it. Graham talked about this too. He talked about healthcare as if it's the care that you receive, when really what they're talking about is the insurance industry.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Nathan, do you have anything else you want to jump in on before we continue?
No, I don't think so.
All right, let's do it. Oh my God, this is so stupid.
If the American people want it, and those people who vote against it should lose their job. That's the way it works. So in terms of your proposal for Medicare for All, I am challenging you and your party who run the Senate to blame it, bring it to the floor for a vote, and we'll see where the votes are.
Yes, because that we all know is how America works, that anytime something is popular and it gets voted down, you have like a whole new Senate next year. You know, that's because that's just like the feedback mechanism is that flawless.
Yeah,
But anyway.
infuriating.
Now let's go back to gas prices. How did we go from energy independence to where we are now? Policy matters. During the campaign in 2020, President Biden and Senator Sanders campaigned against eliminating fossil fuels as we know it in America. Basically, shut it down. No fracking, shut down production. Let me tell you about oil prices. Supply demand. It was $2.38 a gallon, price of gasoline, before COVID hit. We went into lockdown because we had to. It went to $1.77. Now, nobody was saying give the oil companies a subsidy when it was $1.77. When Biden came into office, it went back to $2.38. What's happened between then and now? The policies you pursued in terms of energy production has decreased production in the United States in a very dramatic way. You took oil leases off the table, $45 billion tax on energy production. You shut down the Keystone Pipeline. You took the $10 billion acres that Trump put into production out of production, and you're wondering what happened to gas prices. What happened to gas prices, you declared war on fossil fuels in the United States, and when you go to the pump, you're a victim of that war. Well, let's change that. Let's get back to a rational energy policy. Let's send American gas to Europe so they'll be less reliant on Russian gas. Let's cut Putin off at the knees. Let's find alternatives to Russian oil and gas. It's not the oil companies that are driving these prices. They want to produce more, they just can't. It's not Russia. It's 8% of the oil we use. It is the policies of this administration. The stated goal of this administration is to destroy fossil fuel production in America, and they're on track to do that. And folks, if you want to lower gas and oil prices, vote Republican to see if we can find a few Democrats will go back to increase production in America so that we can lower gas prices in a way that works. All I can tell you is that in terms of getting sick in America, more people come to America for health care than they go anywhere else. To our doctors and nurses who've been through hell out there, God bless you.
Senator Sanders, 4 minutes for a closing statement here on this section 1.
Nathan, was that you want to jump in on this?
I was just laughing that God bless you. God bless the doctors and nurses was about as much as we got on his preferred healthcare policy. Got some thoughts and prayers there.
Fair enough.
Also, notice the use of you, Lindsey Graham going, you did this, you did that. I mean, you really would think Bernie Sanders was the president of the United States from hearing the way Lindsey Graham talks about it. Also, one more point. What is this debate supposed to be about?
That is very unclear, right?
Was there like a question that it's framed around, or like, because it's about gas prices and healthcare and
I mean, I think that right, because it's like Bernie's opening was just like, here's all my Bernie Sanders stuff, make this what you will, screw the establishment, and then Lindsey Graham's opening statement was, here's all the bad stuff about the Democrats, vote Republican. And then like the last couple statements, there's been this kind of push and pull about what they're going to talk about. And I will note, by the way, that just now, Graham kind of conceded in that, right? Because all he talked about in that statement were the two things that Bernie had chosen from Graham's previous statement to talk about, which are gas prices and healthcare.
Yeah. And this was really difficult for me to watch just with Lindsey. This would probably be hard if I was debating him, because he was just lying, like just across the board when he was talking about oil production in the United States. Like some of them were lies by omission, but some were just like outright lies. So like oil production, yeah, the cancellation of the Keystone Pipeline did not impact production levels, even though they said that it did. And at the same time, like the oil production under Biden has been the same or greater than the oil production under Trump. And this is simply just a fact. And he's really just... What worries me about it is it's kind of a line that credulous people will buy.
Yeah.
You know, the person at the top is always the one who's in trouble when something bad happens, which I think is fine. We should blame bad things on the people in charge. But like at the same time, there's this very simple kind of grade school idea of logic that you need to use to believe in what Senator Lindsey Graham is saying. And there's a much longer conversation that you have to have about Bernie to actually understand the problem and solve it with specific policy guidelines.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that Bernie did, I think at least on the diagnosis of the problem, right? I think what he said earlier is maybe the most effective thing you could say, which is just, look, it's clearly not the production, because the last time, oil was such and such a barrel, it was this price, per gallon. It's that they're spending it all on, stock buybacks, because they're monopolists, and monopolists can do stuff like that. Yeah.
By the way, real quick, Ben, just on the specific lies, Biden did issue an executive order that paused new gas and lease sales on government land. Didn't cancel it. He just said, let's hold on until we know that this is a good idea. And that was also struck down by a federal judge. So the idea that the Biden administration is causing oil prices to go up by anything other than, boycotting Russian oil is just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's multi-causal. I mean, it was definitely going up before the invasion of Ukraine, but I think that, I think the essential Bernie point is correct. But yeah, I mean, I think it's like dangerous. Like, I think it can be very effective in the same way that all the defund the police stuff could be, which is that if you're not paying that much attention and you sort of vaguely remember that lots of people were using this phrase defund the police in 2020, and now there's a bunch of crime stuff you're worried about, it's very easy to connect the dots, right? And miss the fact that the police weren't defunded anywhere, right? Like that didn't happen, right? That's that clearly can't be it, right? I mean, there are a couple cities in the whole country, big cities that had some, funding cuts, and then they were reversed, right? And it's certainly crime has gone up across the whole country, right? So that's just not it. But, again, it sounds plausible in the same way. Well, oh, look, there was this, they nixed the Keystone Pipeline, and there was this, anti-fossil fuel industry rhetoric, and now gas prices are going up. That's a very, easy connection to make, even though it doesn't really make sense if you start looking at the details. The other thing I did just want to quickly say about Graham just now, is that he was very slick about this. I mean, before the line that started making Nathan laugh at the end, when he says, well, on healthcare, I'll just say, right? And conveniently, he saves this for the last 20 seconds, right? His defense of the private insurance industry. And he said, well, people from around the country, world, come here to healthcare. It's okay, but that's not, that's totally off topic, right? I mean, it's the question is not whether it's good if you can afford it, right? I mean, the question is what is healthcare like, for like an ordinary person in the United States versus what it's like for an ordinary person in, I don't know, pick a country, Sweden or even Canada.
Mm-hmm. Sweden, Canada, the UK. I mean, like even in the UK, the Conservatives can't touch their socialized healthcare with all of its flaws that it has, and it's because these policies work. Like Lindsey said at the beginning, that like the cost would balloon if the United States tried to do that. That is based upon the idea that, again, the United States can't negotiate with these companies, which it absolutely can. The price of healthcare is absolutely ridiculous in the United States, and it's not because we can't take care of everyone. It's because there's an arms race between hospitals, medical providers, and the insurance industry, where the insurance industry demands huge discounts for their people, and as a result, the providers raise prices, and back and forth and back and forth, and in the end, all that does is serve to increase the price for everyone who is not insured, which of course plays to the insurance companies' pockets, because then it becomes a horrifying situation to not be insured when it comes time to pay the bill.
Yeah, and of course, I should also say, before we go back in, that there is a pseudo-sophisticated way of taking some of this information and trying to turn it into Medicare for all doesn't solve it argument, where you say, well, look, I mean, there are all these other inputs in the system, and just changing how insurance works isn't going to change the rest of that. If it's still fee for service, et cetera, that all sounds sort of plausible when you hear it, but then think about it, it's like, no, if you have single payer health insurance, right, then you have exactly one entity in a market that's paying, then the prices are for everything pretty much going to be what that entity is willing to pay, right? I mean, it's the 800-pound gorilla that can sit wherever it wants, So it absolutely does help with the price issues. Which is not to say that I wouldn't like to go further and have an American NHS, but in any case, I just paused here because Nathan would.
Wait, one irritating conservative talking point that is extremely dishonest. It's all the people who come here for medical care every year. If you cite that without noting the 750,000 Americans who go to other countries for cheap healthcare, people who go to Mexico for operations, like you're just being completely dishonest, right? I mean, Thomas Sowell does this. He says, he cites the number of Canadians who come to America for healthcare, but he doesn't cite the number of Americans who flee America so that they can go afford an operation someplace.
Yeah, I mean, I also just think, yes, absolutely that, right? I also just think there's something fundamentally, grotesque about like just saying like, oh, isn't it, isn't it great that, people from other countries can, come here to, pay top dollar for healthcare, and also isn't it great that we have lower waiting times here? And it's like, yeah, you have lower waiting times because you kicked a bunch of people out of the line, right? I mean, that's a really easy way to make a line shorter, is to say that you can only stand in the line, if you have money, or if you have, if you have good employer insurance or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I mean, yes, rich people in countries with socialized health insurance can, who they have to, they're in the same category. They're treated exactly like everywhere else, right? But sure, they can come over here and, buy their way to the head of the line. But that doesn't seem like that should be a source of pride for us.
Yeah, well, Nathan, you brought up Thomas Sowell, and I think this talking point comes from him. But a lot of the time, you'll see a tactic like this from people on the right, where they will cite, for instance, like lower crime rates among like Africans from Africa who have emigrated to the United States. That showed up in a debate that I did a while ago, and what really happened with that is you have people that are being selected for. The people that are allowed to immigrate from Africa to the United States are going to be healthier, or are going to be better educated. They're going to have the actual resources to be able to do that. And similarly, like if you want to cite people coming to the United States to enjoy our healthcare, who actually has the money to go across like the Atlantic just for healthcare, besides, you know, the uber rich. And of course they're going to come here, but that doesn't apply to the average American or the average citizen of any of these countries. It's not like normal people in England or Canada are fleeing to the United States. It's people who have the actual means to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's like, look, if some cities had police departments where it was like the official policy that they'll investigate a murder faster if the relatives of the deceased pay them off, and they just did this openly, and you said, well, look, you know, people from this other city where everybody, you know, is treated equally, you know, come over here to pay off our cops to, you know, to investigate their murders more quickly. I wouldn't think that said anything good about the city they were coming to, right? I mean, I think it would say something really bad about it. Like, I think you should, in fact, right? I mean, you know, obviously, I think the healthcare outcomes speak for themselves. I wrote an article about this a couple of years ago for Current Affairs called "The Many Bad Arguments Against Medicare for All." You know, I think that the comparative statistics on life expectancy and infant mortality, right, which is even better in some ways, because it's like, you know, you can't really blame it on lifestyle. You know, infants everywhere have pretty much the same lifestyle. They just kind of lie there. But you know, you can say, okay, it's the parents' lifestyle, but especially, you know, mortality amenable to healthcare. Literally, just how many people die who would have lived if they'd had timely health interventions, right? You know, the outcomes are clearly better, you know, with socialized health insurance. But even without that, I don't know. I mean, I think sure, you're going to have limited resources in every system, and you have to find some way of making decisions about how those limited resources are going to be allocated. But I mean, you know, who can pay you the most should really, really, really not be your principle for distributed limited resources. But in any case, let me just do all right. That's oh, nice. Yeah. So I will Nathan just shared this in the chat. Let me just show people for a moment so they can see what we're talking about. So there is the headline on this article is this tiny Mexican town has more than 350 dentists and treats the thousands of Americans who flock across the country border for dental care.
Molar City, they call it in Spanish. They call it Molar City, and its economy is based on fulfilling the need that America can't actually provide. Because our economy is so dysfunctional that we can't get our people's teeth taken care of. Everyone has to go across the border to Molar City in Mexico in order to get their teeth fixed.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, it's a little silly at times when you think about it. Like, what was it? Vermin Supreme, who I love. His platform is Ponies and Teeth. But the thing that I want to point out here is that the actual dental care is really important, not just for your mouth, but like for your entire health. I think, you know, persistent molar diseases are tied directly to, for instance, like heart attacks. So the idea that people have to go to Mexico to get their teeth worked on, that's if you don't have that ability, and if you get stuck not being able to spend money on you know, dental services in the United States, you're also going to be more likely to, you know, have a heart attack. And then, you know, you get rushed to the hospital. Think about like the huge amount of costs that go into that, just because we're not taking these basic preventative measures to make sure everybody can live a healthy, happy, productive life.
Yeah, it is particularly insane, right? It's like bad enough that psychiatry isn't, you know, like isn't covered by so much insurance that's like split off into its own separate category so much, right? I mean, like, which I, you know, sometimes wonder is like some sort of weird cultural hangover of like, you know, Cartesian dualism, right? Do you think the mind is this, you know, like, you know, stuff that goes wrong in your brain isn't just some special category? But I can't even tell a story like that about dentistry. Like, why on earth the mouth is, like, is in a separate category, right? That doesn't even make sense on that level.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love it. The fact that's one of the things that Bernie said is his opening statement. Is extended Medicare to cover dentistry.
Mhm. Dentistry, hearing aids. Another big thing, actually, if your hearing starts to go, it has neurological problems. So yeah, this is a great. I'm loving everything Bernie's doing here.
Yeah.
Senator Graham talks about the need for more oil production. And that's just what the oil companies really want to do. Really? This year, they plan to provide $88 billion, not for new oil production, but for stock buybacks that go to the wealthiest people in the country, people who own their shares. As a nation, I think the time is very long overdue for us to have the courage to do something which is not easy. And that is to take on the people who contribute to Senator Graham's campaign and to Democratic campaigns. To tell the people on top who, during this pandemic, this terrible pandemic, which took 1 million lives, where millions of people are suffering with long COVID, where, as Lindsey says, our doctors and nurses performed absolutely heroically. And during that period, you know what else happened? The billionaires in this country saw a $2 trillion increase in their wealth. That's the people who own the oil companies, people who own the insurance companies, people who own the drug companies, people who own the major Wall Street firms. So the challenge that we face right now is to kind of envision the society we want for our kids and our grandchildren. Do we think that as a nation, all people are entitled to health care? I do. Is that a radical idea? No. It exists 50 miles away from where I live in Canada, which spends half as much on health care but guarantees health care to all people. It exists virtually in every major country. Not a radical idea. Is it a radical idea to negotiate prescription drug prices, have Medicare negotiate prescription drug prices? Of course, it's not a radical idea. Why aren't we doing it? Because the pharmaceutical industry has endless amounts of money to buy politicians, to lobby, and to make campaign contributions. Is it a radical idea to say that every kid in this country, no matter where they live, has the right to get a higher education? I don't think so. Other countries around the world already do that. You go to many European countries, you know how much it costs to go to medical school? Virtually nothing. So I happen to believe that we should make public colleges and universities tuition free. Let's deal with the issue of guns. And we are in a chamber today named after Ted Kennedy, whose two brothers, John and Bobby, were gunned down. And that is, the time is again long overdue for the people of this country, and I think the people are prepared to do it. The question is whether the Congress is prepared to do that, to stand up to the power of the NRA and pass real gun reform legislation. Now, we've seen some progress in recent weeks. We'll see how that plays out. A modest step forward, but we have got to go further. Are we comfortable living in a nation where anybody can walk into a gun store today and come out with an AR-15, which is designed to mow down people in a military fashion? Are we designed with people able to buy high-capacity ammunition magazines? Are we satisfied with a situation where somebody can go to a gun show and not have a background check? So the time now is, for the sake of our children, for the sake of all of us, to pass serious gun safety legislation and have the courage to stand up to the NRA. The bottom line is, Lindsey talks about votes in the Senate, and he's right. Senate and the House are pretty conservative institutions. Poll after poll show they are not representing where the American people are. Our job is to create a government and elected officials who are prepared to stand up against wealthy campaign contributors and fight for ordinary Americans. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to remind you again that your government is run by Democrats. Now, that doesn't mean
Yes. Because
It's a good freeze frame.
'cause yeah. Yeah, and of course, all Democrats are the same. As Nathan's pointed out a couple times, this is a rhetorically effective response, just because Bernie can't quite go at it the way he should. But it's also just an incredibly stupid response, because it's like, what do you like? Yeah, that's yes, as we all know, right? AOC is the Speaker of the House, and Bernie Sanders is the Majority Leader of the Senate, and Bhaskar is the president, right? I mean, like, that's those are the kinds of Democrats we're talking about here, right?
It's absolutely ridiculous. Big point. Mass shootings, because Bernie brought up gun control, and one of the things that I noticed after this most recent massacre was that I looked into since I believe 2015. I looked into the history of this. Every time there's a mass shooting, gun sales go through the roof. And Bernie's sitting there, right? He's talking about how we have to take on these wealthy moneyed interests. We have to take on lobbyists. And that includes taking on the NRA, because, again, the gun manufacturers and gun retailers are making huge amounts of money every single time there's a mass shooting. So not only, is there just a problem in general with regard to gun control, but we actually have an economic incentive to do absolutely nothing about it. Because, again, these mass shootings, as awful as they are really good for business. And, that's absolutely disgusting. And of course, what's going to happen, I'm certain Lindsey Graham is going to come after him on that point, because it seems like this entire time he's interested in representing wealthy oil interests, and next he'll be supporting the NRA and gun manufacturers.
Yeah. I think this seemed very strategic too, that Bernie, like, one thing that Bernie has done really nicely in the course of this is just directed the flow of what they're talking about, right? And really the only exception is, well, the only semi-exception is climate change, right? Which he brought up at one point, and like his second round statement, and Graham didn't really take him up on it too much, but other than that, right? I mean, they've been talking about the stuff they want to talk about, and I think that Bernie obviously wanted to primarily emphasize the things that are the most core for him, healthcare, corporate price gouging, but then, I think he's like, okay, well, and then having, managed to keep it on there for a while. Now let's do gun control, and and I think it's and I think it's a good choice too, because it's like, this is also, I mean, it gets complicated when you get into the nitty gritty of what exactly the kinds of laws we're talking about are and all this stuff, but like the kind of maximalist position that Republicans have by and large held, right? That like you can't. That you can't have any new restrictions on guns, really, right? I mean, that it's just like no, even stuff like having the, was it the fingerprint sensors, right? So you make sure that at least the person who's the legal owner of the gun is using it, right? I mean, even things as basic as that they've opposed, and that's actually, I mean, the good news. I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't matter in the sort of immediate sense, right? But the good, because the Senate's obviously not responsive to this, but I mean, the good news is that like that kind of like maximalist anti-gun control policy is actually pretty unpopular.
Mm-hmm. It's extremely unpopular, and like even so, like super PACs, obviously objectively evil, but there's Gabrielle Gifford's PAC. They've been pushing for years for universal background checks, just universal background checks to make sure you're not handing the gun to somebody with a history of like violent criminal behavior, and they can't even get that through. and that's a super PAC. So, you know, a lot of the time I feel like when the Republicans and the Democrats fight each other, it's like they're getting into a contest to see who can be the best manager for capitalism and make the most money for the oil and gas industry, the tech industry, and the gun industry. This is a massive problem that Bernie has been pointing out from the very beginning. And it's one of the things that I really like about it, because there is a unity to his arguments that began right at the beginning and has continued through here, despite Lindsey constantly trying to pull the whole thing off topic, even though, as Nathan pointed out, I don't think anybody quite knows what the topic is. But Bernie's doing a good job of making it corporate domination over, the American people and our political and economic system.
Yeah. Nathan, thoughts about this one?
No, I'm good.
That we've got all the answers as Republicans, but I find this astonishing that the people in charge of your government are not going to vote on things that Bernie thinks will fix the problem. Why? Because they don't want to vote on these ideas, because they won't fix the problem. So here's the point. If you want things to change, you got to get new people in Washington to run the place. Because the answer to America's problems, Senator Sanders, is not more socialism. Your own message, what time is it? It's time to raise taxes on the rich. Your completely own message. Why do we have such a problem at the border, Senator Sanders? Is because policy matters. 2 million people will come across this country illegally. Only God knows how many we will miss. It's a complete accident waiting to happen down there. We went from having a secure border, having Mexico work with us. We changed our laws so we could have control, and it's all gone away. Folks, if you don't change who's running Washington, the worst is yet to come when it comes to illegal immigration. Gas prices. The reason gas prices are so high is because the policies they've imposed are not working for you. This is a painful transition, as described with President Biden. Their goal is to drive fossil fuels into extinction in the United States. We're talking about getting Iran to produce more gas, Venezuela to produce more gas, the Arabs to produce more gas, to lower prices here. We should be producing more oil and gas here. And when you say it's the oil company's fault, bull. They're in a business. The reason they're not producing more is because it's impossible to produce more under this administration. And if Bernie was in charge and people like him, it'd get worse, not better. All I can say is that gas prices are going through the roof, and nothing's going to change until you change Washington. Now, I don't expect to fix many of these problems with Bernie. I'll try. But there are plenty of Democrats up there who I think would have a phased-in approach to energy production. We went from being energy independent to having to mortgage your house to fill up your car. How the hell did that happen? It happened because of policy. You got a chance to fix this, American people, and I would ask you to fix it. Put Republicans in charge of the House and the Senate to stop this craziness and see if we can find a path forward from 22 to 24 to get things back to more normal. People out there, Senator Sanders, are living in hell. $600 a month due to inflation, and wages are not going up. America deserves better than this. We can do better than this. But the path charted by Senator Sanders is full-on socialism. Full-on, unequivocal socialism from cradle to grave. That's not going to fix America. We are not a socialist nation. There is a better way. And I'll promise you this. If I'm chairman of any committee, particularly the budget committee, If we take over, I will sit down with Democrats and Republicans to find a way to fix our national debt, which is appalling. Something like Simpson Bowles, not socialism.
Senators, thank you. That is the end of segment one. If you will, come join us at these desks. We'll make a transition to the seated, moderated section, and we'll go deeper into some of the discussions you've talked about gas prices, healthcare, immigration, and the like. Stand by. We'll make that transition.
So I think maybe another time we can, we could do part two, but this is probably a pretty good cutoff point for tonight. Gentlemen, final thoughts.
Well, I've watched the rest of it, and there's a lot of it goes around again on the same talking points a few more times, but. Yeah, I mean, again, there you saw one of the unfortunate things is that even though Bernie does very, very well in this debate, Lindsey Graham is able to make it clear what he wants from people here, which is he says over and over, vote Republican. He says, vote Republican 2022, put us in power, we'll fix the problems. He's making it, I mean, Lindsey Graham is using this opportunity to try and get Republicans back into power. Yeah. Now, Bernie Sanders doesn't really have a thing he can do or ask for here. Bernie Sanders doesn't meet that by saying, vote Democratic, because he can't. He's not currently running for office, right? He can't defend... He can't really say, please put the existing Democrats back into office in 2022 and things will get better, because he knows that they won't. He knows that a lot of the problems that he's highlighting are the fault of the Democratic Party. So unfortunately, even though Bernie Sanders has a fantastic message, does really, really well in this debate, like better than I've seen him in a long time, Lindsey Graham has a demand and he has a story and he's pushing for something. And Bernie is kind of stuck in a way because we don't have a movement that is poised to do any particular thing that he can rally people around right now.
I mean, that's a really, really good point, Nathan. Occupy tried to be that movement and we got systematically destroyed. The Bernie Sanders movement to get him elected, there was a large growing movement there, and hopefully those people will come back and be activated again. But yeah, I mean, at this point, I think a large mass populist movement is really the only way to address these very serious problems, because as we've all agreed, the Democrats are absolute garbage for the most part, with a few notable exceptions.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, it is tricky because, like, here's something else that's true, and I know that some people, there's like a portion of the audience that doesn't want to hear this, but it is true, right? That like, Democrats are garbage, right? But that doesn't make the difference between them and the Republicans non-existent, right? That there's like, if I think if Donald Trump were put back in office in 2024, or God help us, Ron DeSantis, I think that would be like a really grim outcome, right? Like not because I think that there's going to be like, we're just going to like have flat out fascism and Trump's going to declare himself president for life. I actually don't think that, if only because that would be too destabilizing the Capitol, for them to allow that. But I do think there are ways that like there is a spectrum, right? Democracy is on a spectrum. And I think there, like you sort of have like a regular parliamentary democracy on one end and, I don't know, Pinochet on the other, right? They have and we're already starting about halfway down, that. And, there are definitely ways we could degrade, to a much worse place in that spectrum, right? That's, I think that's entirely possible. I think there's lots of stuff that's been proposed that, would take us some distance, down there. And, and I also think that certainly, I mean, like, look at all the Trump officials who, like, during the last couple months was his lame duck, they were doing this like orgy of deregulation, while they had a chance. Certainly the fanatical opposition by the Republicans to even the most incremental forms of climate action, and the like increasing turn towards sort of performative displays of cruelty, on trans people, drag queens, all that stuff, right? That's I think only going to get worse. And maybe most significantly in terms of the possibility of the kind of movement that you're talking about, Brad. I mean, I think that like it's just going to be a much tougher terrain for union organizing, right? That's I mean, if you look at the things that Trump's National Labor Relations Board was doing, the kind of rulings that they were making, I mean, it is really good that they're not in there right now when all these hundreds of Starbucks are unionizing, for example.
Mm-hmm. Starbucks, Amazon.
Yeah. Apple now. Yeah. And all of which,
suddenly these billionaires are jumping to the right because the left has gone crazy.
Yeah, no, exactly. So it's like, so I think it would be like a real serious, like, yeah, I think it'd be a very grim outcome if the Republicans were, if Lindsey Graham got his way, right? People vote Republican, which unfortunately I think is the most likely outcome right now certainly in the midterms and probably also in 2024, right? That's, a lot could change, but right now it sure looks like it. And all of which is, I've got to say though, like, think, okay, most likely that's what's going to happen and there's nothing to do and it's awful, right? But it's like, this is kind of what nudges me towards thinking that maybe one more Bernie run is not the worst idea, right? Especially if Biden, I mean, unfortunately, Bernie probably wouldn't do it otherwise, but especially if Biden, bows out for 2024, because, I think what we saw tonight, like, yeah, look, if it was attached to an actual demand, if it was attached to vote Bernie, right? Like, I think that what we saw tonight could actually be a really effective general election message. And even aside from the fact that obviously I want the guy who calls himself a democratic socialist and has the agenda I like and all that stuff to become president for many, many reasons, right? But like, even purely just in terms of like avoiding the harms of Trump or DeSantis or whoever coming in 2024, I think that really might be the best bet. I mean, like, look, like, because seriously, if not Bernie, who, right? I mean, like who's gonna, Kamala Harris? We're gonna get Mayor Pete.
Yeah.
Like what's the like what's behind door number 2 here?
Well, yeah, and if you look, I just did this thread going through the new Texas GOP platform because they just had their convention. They passed a new platform. The big headline was that the platform officially says that Joe Biden isn't the president, which is true. It does say that, but that's like the cherry on top of the shit cake, because the whole thing, if you go through, is terrifying, right? They have lurched so far to the right. They've gotten, they've just gone way back again on LGBT stuff, where they're calling, homosexuality an aberrant lifestyle and all that. But I mean, they're so insanely radical. They're essentially, they're anti any policy that promotes pedestrians and bikes over cars. They're in favor of abolishing most of the federal government, all income taxes, all property taxes. It's really a very it's an agenda for an authoritarian theocracy. Oh, and the massive voting restrictions too, and essentially putting as many bureaucratic requirements on voting as possible, and then if you make a mistake, prosecuting you, which of course they did in Texas in the case of that black woman who was a Bernie Sanders supporter, incidentally, and was sentenced to prison for 5 years. So it's very scary. There are huge differences between the two parties now that the Republican Party is lurching so far to the right. I mean, they're really becoming very scary. But the problem is we don't have anyone to stop them. And right. Bernie Sanders is too old. We have to admit that he is too old. Now, he might still be our best bet, even though he is too old, right? He's not too old in a sense. He's alive. We got him. He's clearly in good form. It would be nice if he were 10 years younger, but he does appear to be what we have. And that's very, very alarming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the
no,
Republicans have
absolutely.
been working quite a while to set things up so that they can govern as a minority party, because as things get worse for the average American, they are going to need to be able to maintain power with a smaller and smaller group of people behind them.
Yeah, no, I think that's clearly right. And I mean, even if you read like Rick Perlstein, right? He wrote this series of books about the conservative movement. There's Before the Storm, which is about the Goldwater campaign. There's one called Nixonland. There's one called The Invisible Bridge, The Fall of Nixon, The Rise of Reagan, and then the final installment is Reaganland that just came out like last year, I think. And in Reaganland, right, he talks about how during the Carter administration, right, there was this talk of like all of these pretty basic reforms to make it easier for people to vote, like same day registration, stuff like that, and there was a point where it actually looked like that might pass in a bipartisan way. And there were all these right wing interest groups who like really made this big push to get all the Republicans to vote against it. It's like, are you guys crazy? Right? You can't vote for this, right? Think about who's, you're not going to win elections, right? If you do this, this is the early 1970s.
Yeah. By the way, there was one thing that stuck out to put it back on the debate. Is anyone actually mortgaging their house to pay for gas? Like,
I think that's a rhetorical flourish.
Well, yeah, but he said it was a rhetorical flourish when it seemed at the beginning, and then like when he brought it back up again, it seemed like he was. Yeah,
he might really believe that. Who knows what Lindsey Graham actually believed?
No, fair enough.
But on that point, the Texas platform actually explicitly calls for the repeal of all motor voter laws. So they don't want you to be able to register to vote when you go to the DMV, which now I don't know what possible justification there is for repealing the law that says you're given an opportunity to register to vote for when you go to the DMV, other than wanting fewer people to vote, right? I mean, because that doesn't have anything to do with fraud. Right? There's no pretext, because the whole pretext for all of this is there's massive voter fraud. So we have to introduce all these onerous requirements, and we got to have they got it so that you have to re-register every 5 years, and if you don't and you try to vote, you get prosecuted. So, but repealing the motor voter laws just shows you exactly what it's about.
Yeah. Well, Ben, you said at the beginning that, even though both the Republicans and the Democrats are fundamentally terrible parties, there is a more preferable outcome. And that's right. Absolutely the case, because, if you look at what the Republicans are doing lately, it's incredibly dangerous. Nathan, you pointed that out. And there's a lot of people like, I'm an anarchist. And there's a lot of people in my kind of segment of the left that are like, oh, if voting did anything, they'd make it illegal. Well, look what they're doing.
They are actually working on that. They are passing laws to make it harder. Notice, by the way, like gun ownership, that's fine. Right, so they're clearly not worried about armed insurrection, right? Voting, voting and labor unions, those things they are actually worried about. I should say too, just so nobody gets this twisted, I've actually never been you could go back and look at anything I wrote, anything I said, any debate I did in 2020. I have never been a we can push Biden to the left guy. I always thought that Biden was like what you see is what you get, right? That this is that like. I always just thought he was going to be a mediocre, shitty corporate Democrat. I just thought that like, if our options are to be governed by a mediocre, shitty corporate Democrat or Donald Trump, you're better off with a mediocre, shitty corporate Democrat. And it's not that like, oh, you do it this time and we'll do something else next time, or, we'll push it to the left. None of that stuff, right? I think, no, you can't like, the long-term thing is you're not going to, at the risk of being predictable, you need to have an organized working class that can like actually exert meaningful pressure on the political system. And we don't have that right now. So yeah, right now this is what we get. You got to work on that first.
Yeah, no, I think you're 1,000% right. I don't know. I feel like what we need, the argument that's going on the very radical left between, and it'll come up as soon as we get back closer to the election, it's going to be, is it direct action or is it voting? Guys, you can do both. And for the love of God, do both.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, yeah. Right.
I think the position of leftists before the election of Biden, or those of us who had the kind of Chomsky position that you need to vote for Biden, even if we detest him, is that we detested him and didn't expect much of him, if anything at all. We thought he'd be ineffectual. And we even thought that his being ineffectual would be very dangerous, which was why we thought it was a terrible idea for Democrats to nominate him. I was just citing recently Bronco Machitich's article in Jacobin, where he predicted the Biden presidency that would be a horrible failure and would empower the radical right, which was why Democrats were foolish to nominate someone like Joe Biden, who, if he got into office, would be a catastrophe for the country and then would make Democrats very unpopular. So, we were warning over and over and over the left, don't nominate Joe Biden, because first, Joe Biden is likely to lose, which he would have if it were not for the fact that COVID swept in and saved him by killing a bunch of Trump's voters. So
yeah, well, and also just the general fact that, like, in 2020, it's like, yeah, you have this pandemic that's leading to like unprecedented, breakdown, and at the same time, like, casual observer of the news, like, half the country is on fire. Yeah, the guy who's in power right now then is probably going to do badly. If anything, it's amazing that Trump got as much support as he did under those circumstances, right?
Honestly, I think it showed
he
how
100% for sure
yeah.
would have beaten Biden if not for that. But you were saying, Brett?
I was just saying, I think it really shocked me how few people voted for Biden in that. You would have, but I think it was just a sign of just like how unenthusiastic for Biden just about everyone in the country was. I mean, I think there was even more enthusiasm for Hillary before that. Biden, it seems just like he was kind of a placeholder, just like, okay, yeah, this guy. And he was able to win specifically because of these unprecedented tragedies that were happening, in large part, as a result of Donald Trump's incompetence. But like, what we need, again, and we were talking about this earlier, is an engaged movement. And that movement was building under Bernie. It's been building under Bernie for 2 years. Before that, it was being built by Occupy, but it keeps falling apart. And I think a big part of that is, as you pointed out, Nathan, like Bernie, his biggest weakness in this debate is he doesn't have any immediate actionable item that he wants the audience to do. Whereas Lindsey took this entire time to, essentially audition as a manager for oil billionaires, and just tells people to vote Republican because things are bad now and Democrats are in power, supposedly.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I do think that, like, Nathan's point is incredibly important, that it's like, yes, we, in fact, and like, you can go back and, discussion in the chat about who exactly said what. All I'm saying is I never did, right? But like, I think that but yeah, I mean, one thing everybody on the left did say is that it would be really bad if Biden were nominated, that there's a good chance that he would lose, which, again, I think 100% for sure he would have lost if COVID hadn't happened. He barely won, when it did happen, and that and that he wasn't going to be like, he was going to be extremely uninspiring in whatever he did in office, which, is the first, like, I wrote an article for Jacobin that came out on Biden's inauguration day saying, like, there's no reason to believe that he was going to do the things that any nice progressive things he says on his campaign website, because we've seen this movie before. We're gonna say, Nathan?
Can I just say, you said placeholder, Biden as a placeholder. I was just looking back at this article I wrote in August of 2020. I just want to quote from it because I think it's relevant. It said, I said this was my appeal to people to vote for Biden even though they hated him. I said the way I look at a Biden presidency is that it's Biden is a placeholder, and that it buys us time. It relieves a bit of the pressure and gives us space to organize. because Donald Trump, obviously actively wants to destroy the left, and Joe Biden is ineffectual. But I said that the time we buy with a Biden presidency can't be wasted. We know that a Biden presidency will be next to useless, despite all of the insistence from his camp that he has the most progressive platform in history. I remember how Obama talked on the campaign trail and how he governed. You can't fool me twice, just as you said just there, Ben. I said the main project is actually build left institutions, and that we have to use this time, these years of the Biden presidency, in order to. But I said the real concern about a Biden presidency is that because it will probably be ineffectual and unpopular, it will open up space for one of the truly monstrous Republicans, the smart fascists like Tom Cotton and Dan Crenshaw, and that would be a nightmare. And of course, Ron DeSantis on the list now.
Yeah, no, I mean this is the thing, right? I mean, like one of the things I pointed out in that Jackman article came out on Inauguration Day is that some of these literally. Some of the exact same, not Bernie level ambitious, but somewhat ambitious, sounding progressive things that are, were on the Biden-Harris campaign website. We're also on the Obama-Biden campaign website in 2008, right? That we're going to have card check, right? For labor organizing, that there's going to be a public option for healthcare. Like they said all that stuff, and or not all of it, but they said much of it in 2008, and those things were dropped without a second thought very early on, which makes sense, right? Because this is because it's who these people are, and also again, I don't there's a question of power here. I don't think. The first New Deal programs, right? The first 100 days, even that stuff wouldn't have happened if not for the fact that, social dysfunction due to bank runs, right? This is not anything that FDR, campaigned on, right? But due to that, I mean, there were people in rural areas who were literally marching on the, banks and county offices with pitchforks, right? I mean, this is we were on the verge of some real social chaos there, and certainly it being pushed as far as it did, and then going further a few decades later with the Great Society, has a lot to do with the fact that we had these militant sit down strikes in the late 30s that built up the kind of labor movement that could be a real political force. And that just doesn't exist right now. So there's zero pressure, right? Coming in that direction, right? I mean, this is. You could give up the public option in the first nanosecond of negotiation, with the insurance companies over Obamacare, and you're just, nothing's going to happen, right? Because that's just the balance of forces that we've got. And again, you have to change, you have to change that, right? You have to really, you have to have. If you don't have the organized working class as the base, I mean, long term, right, nothing much is going to change. I mean, even if Bernie Sanders became president in 2024, that would be nice, because there would be a presidentially bully pulpit for those efforts, right? But without those efforts being successful, you're still not going to get it, because it's going to be you're just you're going to get a bunch of Democrats who are either opposed to it, opposed to all of those measures, or who are squishy on them. And are amenable to establishment pushback, so anyway, that's all of which is just to say, I think as long as we've got that, whatever it is, 6.7% private sector unionization rate, I think that I think the political consequences of that are going to be what they're going to be. I do think that Bernie running again is probably the best chance of staving off disaster in 2024, and I do agree with Nathan. It would be, I mean, look, all else being equal, I would certainly prefer somebody who wasn't 80, right? But right now we don't have that person. I mean, maybe Fetterman, if that goes well, we'll see, right? But right now we don't have that person, so So I think, unfortunately, this is the only game in town. Oh, last, before I at least let Nathan go, I think Brent's going to stick around for a minute. Last thing, just because I realized I forgot to say it earlier, is that I loved that segment where Graham was trying to scare the audience, or I don't know, the donors or whoever he was trying to scare, say this is socialism. This is just full on socialism. This, cradle to grave socialism. It's like, man, just keep scaring me with that, right? I mean, that is all. That's a, man. You say that people's basic needs are going to be taken care of from the point that they're born to the point they die. I mean, that's. Please save me from that, Lindsey.
Bernie had a big smile. You see his big smile. And Lindsey was saying that, and then he addresses it. I think later in the debate, he actually has a whole thing about, you're saying this is socialism. You're saying this is socialism. You're saying this. The reason he has a big smile is he loves that. Like, he loves when people come at him with this is socialism thing, because he has a great response to that. So he does it in the debate.
There's one thing I wanted to point out, and Nathan, it's been absolutely wonderful to have you on here and meet you.
It's been fun to chat. Yeah,
absolutely. I think one of the major things that the Republicans understand about gaining and wielding power, and the Democrats just can't get, or if they do understand it, they just don't use it for whatever reason. In any negotiation, you never ever start by asking for what you want. You always ask for more than what you want and let the other side force you back to your original position. And hey, maybe sometimes they'll just roll over and let you have the thing you didn't think you were going to be able to get. That is why the Republicans are running so hard to the right. This is their answer to Clintonite bipartisanship. They're pulling to the right specifically so that when they go to fascism, they get corporatocracy. They get their donors' needs met, and they have a large section of crazy people who want to do whatever for them. We saw that on the 6th. The Democrats keep starting, like Nathan, I think you mentioned with Obama. They keep starting and having an argument with themselves, and then losing that argument, and then going, okay, well, let's get rid of the public option before you even go to the table. And it's like they think that if we can just be so moderate, and if we can just meet these people where they are, we will be able to pass policy. But it's just not possible. That's not how anything works.
If you meet them where they are, then they go, oh, well, we'll just move. In fact, and you see that in the Texas GOP agenda, because their starting position now is abolish the federal government. Yeah, that's their starting position, except for the military. Right.
Well, of course,
abolish the Federal Reserve, abolish the EPA, abolish the Department of Education, abolish Social Security, privatize it, put cryptocurrency in the Bill of Rights. I mean, it's insane stuff. That's their starting position. Their starting position is, okay, let's have a fascist theocracy. Okay, you don't want that? Well, okay, well, maybe we'll just privatize Social Security. We won't get rid of it altogether, and then that's your compromise. Anyway, I gotta get out of here, but it's been real fun. Let's do it again soon.
All right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
See you, Nathan. All right. Brent, what do you got cooking?
Yeah. Well, I have a couple of thoughts here. There was something that I really felt Lindsey kept going back to the border and trying to scare everyone with the stuff. The reason there are so many people coming from South and Central America to try to cross the border is because the United States has had a policy of destabilizing that region since the 50s. Yeah. You go back and look at what General Smedley Butler says in War is a Racket, that he was there representing American sugar interests, American fruit interests and oil interests. And of course, if you constantly attack and undermine governments in South and Central America, I wonder what's going to happen to the normal people who would very much like to live and, gain whatever piece of happiness we can during this short trip on this planet. So I felt like one, there is no ethical case, in my opinion, that can be made for halting the free movement of peaceful people. I don't think it's possible to do that. But two, with all of these people coming from the borders, even like the libertarians agree with this, a world with free movement, not even a borderless world, just free movement, would be $75 trillion richer. That is a huge amount of money. That's a lot of problems that we could solve, but the Republicans are sitting here constantly trying to frighten everybody with the brown people coming north. So,
well, and this thing about terrorists that Lindsey kept going back to, which is weird because that felt very like 2005 to me.
Bush era.
Yeah. Like, but the thing about the terrorists, I mean, it's just silly, right? Because it's like, okay, hold on, but like, what are we actually talking about here, right? Because like, if you, I mean, even aside from, you know, the idea that like, you know, Al Qaeda Mexico is, you know, moving on the border, but like, even aside from the silliness of that, right? Like, it's like, sure, right? There are people that, you know, you can legitimately within that principle that you just laid out say, you know, you would like to stop from coming over, you know,
yeah, I mean, a good example might be like MS-13, even though it's actually our fault.
Yeah, it's totally our fault. But yeah, because they were, yep. But like sure, like, you know, somebody's like an MS-13 member, right? You do want to stop them from crossing, or just like a, you know, whatever, cartel person, whatever. Like, but the question is, like, if you have, what's going to be easier for them, right? If that's the only thing that whatever sort of border enforcement agency, and by the way, in any scenario where I would sign off on a border enforcement agency, I'd want to completely disband and start over with all new people, because what we've got now is a horror show. But like, you know, if whatever border enforcement agency you have, if the only thing they're doing is stopping those people, right? Or if those people can blend into this great mass of other people who are coming over at the same time. I mean, come on.
Stopping, you know, peaceful people who are coming here specifically to work. I mean, study after study has found that immigrants, whether legal or illegal, they actually are less criminal than the native population. And that totally makes sense, because, hey, they want to come here and live here, and they don't want to cause problems for anyone. Their goal is to become part of this society, again, so that they can prosper and get away from the circumstances, whatever it was, that drove them out of their countries, most of which, in the case of, you know, Central and South America, is actually us. You know, if people aren't familiar, look up like Operation Condor, look up what was done Allende.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, like, and also I should say, like, there's this idea a lot of people have that there's some sort of tension between wanting, you know, more social democracy and more immigration, but that only works, like, there's only a tension there if you just allow the unexamined premise that that immigrants aren't as likely to, as native born Americans, to like work and contribute to the economy, which is a crazy premise. Like that, you know, because if without that premise, it's like, yeah, you have, you know, more going around, but you also have more to go around, right? You know, you have a bigger pie, right, of tax money to use to, you know, to distribute to everybody.
And many hands make work light. And while we've got capitalism going on, like the economy in a capitalist society must constantly expand. It is predicated on infinite growth. When there is not infinite growth, you get a crash, you get a recession. When the growth simply slows down, you get a recession. And one of the ways that, you know, first world nations are able to reliably grow the population and therefore increase the amount of money we're doing, because again, many hands make work light. And also every single one of those immigrants is someone who needs medical care, food, housing. They are customers as well as workers. This is the way. Letting more immigrants into this country is absolutely 100% the way to prosperity. The problem is that we have these specific people and interests in their way that are just using them as a boogeyman to scare us into supporting whatever insane policies they want to they want to do. It's the same thing, like, you know, you got the poor man with the rich man, and then you got the even poorer immigrant next to him. The rich man has 99 cookies. The poor man has 1 cookie. The immigrant has none, and the rich man says, "Hey, you better watch out. That immigrant wants to take your cookie."
Yeah. I think the version of that I've seen is saying, "Hey mate, I think that immigrant is trying to take your cookie," which because I think the rich guy's supposed to be Murdoch in that one. But yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, I'm pretty much with you on that whole thing. I mean, I think that if you you could if you did come up with some much more compelling reason that I've heard, right? It has to be, that you can't have a certain speed of immigration or something, right? Then okay, I'd be much less disgusted by the system if there was an actual line that you could get into, right? I mean, this is what people always say. Oh, what about the people who waited in lines? There's no fucking line that most people can get into, right? They for the vast majority of people, you just can't, right? You're just not allowed to immigrate legally, right? It's not we'll take a number and then we'll tell you when it comes up, right? I mean, that would actually be much more just the way it does work right now, which is that you have to fall into certain very specific categories. So yeah, I think the Lindsey Graham border stuff was completely ridiculous, and it did feel in general, right? Like so much of that stuff, I think it really felt like for a lot of it was that Bernie was treating it as a debate, right? He wanted to reach somebody who, might not necessarily start out on his page, right, in the audience, right? I think that's why one of the first things he said is that he's an independent, right? That he wanted to create a little distance between himself and the Democratic Party brand, and and he wanted to focus on the issues that are the most popular, et cetera. Whereas
Graham spent the whole time sloganeering, essentially.
Yeah, see, it really felt campaign rally-ish. It really felt like Graham was just trying to talk to people who were already basically on his page. I'm not quite sure why, right? I'm not quite sure I completely understand what he was getting out of it.
I got to tell you, I really think he was going for oil donors. He just kept bringing that up. And on one hand, yeah, you could do that because, a lot of people are working very hard to hang Joe Biden with this. I even saw one of those Joe Biden, I did that stickers on one of the pumps I was filling up at a little while ago, which is ridiculous. But that's going to be an effective line, an effective tactic. But I honestly think he's trying to convince several or even maybe one major oil and gas interested individual to support him and the Republican Party going into midterms. It's got to be that, because otherwise, yeah, I mean, I don't feel like he was trying to persuade anyone who wasn't already on his side.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. Well, Charles has a fun question, but before in the chat, but before I answer it, was there another point you wanted to make about the debate itself, or?
I think I made most of the points. I was able to get out a lot of that, and there was so much specifically in there. But I guess what I wanted to kind of talk about with you, because you mentioned earlier on that, yeah, if we have border security, if we're only making violent people illegal, obviously they're going to have a much easier job actually catching real criminals and real dangerous people that are coming into our country. So I did want to acknowledge that on your part, because I think that's a really, really smart and very solid and salient argument on it. I feel overall so one of the things that they noticed with regard to the Bernie campaign, and this was, I think, back in 2016, where you had Trump, you had Hillary Clinton, you had Bernie, the level of education that Bernie spoke at was so much higher than the level of education that Hillary was speaking to and the level of education that Trump was speaking to. Trump was actually, like, I believe his patterns and the words in particular that he used, this was words, Trump's rhetoric could be understood by a fourth grader. Or a fifth grader. Hillary Clinton's was up around like first, second year of high school, maybe high school graduates. Bernie was up, at the level of college graduate and above. And oftentimes there's a longer case that has to be made so that people stop thinking reactively and actually consider the situation. What worries me is that as the left, we have something of a Sisyphean task to deal with, used car salesmen like Lindsey Graham, game show hosts like Donald Trump. Oftentimes our rhetoric, while being correct and true, is also really, really difficult to understand and difficult to fit into a soundbite that can be, mass produced and projected to the entire country. So I suppose I think that Graham's biggest, point in this debate was that the people that he was speaking to, again, are either an oil billionaire or people who are not college educated. And I do wonder oftentimes if the Republican Party, like, one of the reasons they don't want to see universal education and constantly attack, the universities, Charlie Kirk's entire career was predicated on that, is they don't want people getting up to the point where they are smart enough and educated enough to understand what is happening to them and what the solution would be. And I guess my question on that to you is, one, as a debater, but also two, as a leftist, like, how do we square this circle? How do we solve that problem?
How do we solve which problem specifically?
Well, so the two problems would be, one is, as far as debate and rhetoric goes, how do we play to the cheap seats without compromising?
Yep.
Yeah. And then the larger question then would be, how do we defeat an entire party predicated on playing to the cheap seats, essentially? And, when I'm saying cheap, I don't mean class
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a little tricky, but I do think, I think in a sense what Bernie is doing here, right? I mean, I think is actually a good, I think as a, as a response to somebody like Graham, right? I mean, like, I don't know that you could get, that you could realistically, hope for much better than this. And I think it's, I think it's a good approach. I think, like, Bernie comes out of this debate, right, seeming much more like he is, cued into ordinary people's interests and has concrete solutions for them. It isn't just sort of, spouting partisan narratives. I don't know. I mean, this is kind of, and I guess I'll loop this into Charles's question, right? Which is what lessons I think you'll take away from this debate for the one on Saturday. And, of course, that's a much more, that's a much weirder context. Like, in a way, I actually sort of wish I were debating Lindsey Graham on Saturday instead of these three people, but because that would be much simpler, right? But the fact that it's four people and there are certain respects in which the three people will be on the same page about a lot of things, but it's also just kind of innately chaotic. I think is a real disadvantage there. But I think you could certainly, I think that stuff that, watching Bernie here is a good reminder for me of is the importance of, of trying to steer, the subject that you're talking about, right? Try to sort of cohere together like a single clear narrative from whatever the combination of subjects are, like in Bernie's case in this debate, it's like all of these problems are a result of, corporations, rich people having too much power, and, and that's the common solution to all of them. But it's also, something that, I mean, look, the first debate that I ever did, more or less, was in 2019. I say more or less because I think maybe even late 2018, early 2019, there were a couple times when I'd be like arguing with some right winger on Twitter, and at a certain point they were like, "Hey, you want to come over to my like Twitch and we'll, argue about it on screen." And like I did that a couple times, right? But like the first real one was in spring 2020. I was still, Jennifer and I were still living in New Jersey. And so I had actually just done the very first debunk segment on the Michael Brooks show. Very first one. It was about the non-aggression principle. And
I'm so glad that you started with that.
yeah, that was number one.
That has been causing me ulcers for like 6 years.
And Dave Smith, who some people watching probably know about, I know you do, but he's a libertarian podcaster and comedian, and like he's he's very active in the Libertarian Party, and he did this episode where the entire episode was just him and his like kind of wingman co-host guy whose name I do not recall off the top of my head, Lewis something I think, but I'm not sure. They just like kind of dunking on that, responding to the segment, and then pretty immediately, right? Because I said, hey, well, you want to do a debate on this? You want to argue about it? And he was like, yep, sure. And so I said, can you come in to our studio? And so I get on a train and go to New York, and the part of the problem is the name of the show. So I was on in studio, and it's that part of the problem episode, that first debate, has long since been paywalled, which I'm very grateful for, because I don't think it was very good, on my end, because it was essentially the first one I'd done, and I sucked at it, right? Like, and I mean something really specific. It's not that I think I had bad arguments. I actually don't think that particularly. Like I think that what I was saying was right, although there were certain things that I could have had better responses to and whatever. But the specific respect in which I sucked at it is that I didn't really get the format, right? I treated it like I was in a graduate seminar and we had all the time in the world to sort of like bat around playful examples and sort of circle around the point and get to it whenever we got to it, which in that context just reads as evasive, right? You can't do that, right? You got to get to the point. You got to be clear. You got to structure an argument, and so I think that was really bad. I mean, I think that I think there are other more recent ones I feel much happier about, right? I mean, Charlie Kirk, certainly I feel good about that, whatever. But like, and in general, I just think I'm much better at it now than I was then. But I mean, something that experiences like that forced me to think more about is how am I, like, there is a certain needle that I think you really have to thread. Between, I was talking about this. I was in last weekend. I was in Baltimore. I did a reading the Hitchens book at this worker-owned bookstore in Baltimore, and this came up in the Q&A. And I said this there, right? That I think that there is this needle that I would thread that, like, look, I obviously I'm a philosophy guy. I like, like really like breaking apart arguments, putting them back together again, thinking about how they work, all that stuff, right? I mean, that's my bag, absolutely. But and I think it's important. And I think it's important for certain kinds of audiences that have different expectations that you be able to do it on that level, right? I think it is important to have like good, well worked out arguments on this stuff. But then I think there's this work of translation you need to do, right? For, okay, but how do I present that when you have a limited amount of time, right? You're talking to people who are, willing to extend you some attention and, and hear you out to a point, right? But, if what you're saying isn't interested them early on, right, they'll tune out. And so I think that, I think it's good to start with the well worked out arguments, but then I think you have to think, and it's good to have that in your back pocket, right, if you need it, right? But then I think it's also important to be able to sort of distill it to its to its most easily communicated essence, right? I mean, like, what's the most important point I'm trying to get across here, and what's the simplest, most commonsensical way of framing that point, right, without losing what's essential about it, right? So, like, in the Kirk debate, the goal, for me, and the primary one at least, was to say, Charlie, like a lot of these people, has done this, like, rhetorical transition that that he's a populist now, and I don't want to show that that's bullshit, right? That there's nothing. Right? That's the primary goal, right? And so, how do you, or even like the Rogan thing, right? It's not a debate, right? I mean, it's like a friendly conversation with a guy I think is right about some stuff and wrong about some stuff, but like, even there, right? I mean, it's kind of the same thing, right? Because it's like, I'm not gonna, you can't go on Rogan and just go into like, here, let me tell you about the critique of the Gotha program, for the next half hour, right? Like, he's not gonna stay engaged with that, right? Like, so you have to think about, like, okay, what's the sort of like core thing that maybe expresses some of
So you're saying what we should do is find a way to express the Gotha program or criticism of the Gotha program in MMA terms.
yeah, exactly. Just nothing but MMA examples, that like, different kinds of holds that somebody could be put in and how they represent. Yeah, absolutely. MMA, psychedelics, comedy. Right, these are the examples you can use. Yeah, no, but I mean, yeah, I think that it's like, so it's like, okay, I mean, one thing that I said very early on in the Rogan interview is something that has a, like, fancy philosophical source, but what I like about, which is that I got it from reading G.A. Cohen, right? But like, what I like about it is that it's like super simple and super intuitive, right? Which is, I think that inequality is unacceptable if it's tied to factors that are outside of your control, right? That's G.A. Cohen's socialist equality of opportunity principle, right? But it's also just like, I think, in my experience, since I started trotting that out, most people will nod along with that. They'll be like, yeah, okay. Right, like, that sounds right. Like, even though it's actually incredibly radical if you really take it seriously, right? I mean, that, like, that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's incompatible with a capitalist economy. So I just think, like, all of which is just to say, right? Like, I think that you can have, and I don't claim that I'm doing this in a perfect way by any means, right? But like, I think that there are, I think that. I think that you have to, I'm not saying dumb down, but, what I am saying is distill, right? I think you have to, like, distill what you want to say to, like, a pretty, like, simple, stripped down essence and be able to communicate it, in that form. And then if somebody wants the long version, they get the long version.
Absolutely. Well, that's a very good point. And, I think also we have to have a decent amount of faith in people, that they are able to, that most people, if they give it a fair shake, are able to absorb these arguments and think about them and come to, a correct solution that makes sense for them in their life, as opposed to, constantly getting manipulated by these charlatans. So that's a really good point. I've always thought of debate, and this may just be because, I'm an ex-theater kid. Debate strikes me as primarily performance art, but it is performance art that is centered around logos and thoughts and ideas. And I think that like there's a balance that people who actually approach debate from a good faith position, that actually believe in its ability to express ideas and hopefully change people's lives for the better. There has to be a element of production values, but you can't just go pure production values. Yeah, I had a debate recently. I didn't even, on my channel, I didn't even call it. It was Brent's crazy screaming match with Alex Stein 99, who's like recently been on freaking Tucker Carlson. And, when I debated this guy, I realized like the entire time he was just going for little kind of gotcha clips. He was very like a style that's heavily informed by cable news. And I think that, that style of debate and rhetoric doesn't come out of nowhere. And I think, Lindsey Graham, what he showed here is he has kind of similar things going on where it's there's an element of performance art in all debate, but certain debaters are more performance than art.
Well, there's a happy medium, right? I mean, because I totally agree. I mean, there is absolutely an element of performance. I mean, that's actually probably a very simple way of saying some of what I was trying to say earlier, right? About what I didn't get early on, right? That like, that there are things that you could say and like, Q&A at a talk in the philosophy department that people will be like, oh, good point, right? But like you try to say all of that in that context, like what the fuck are you doing, right? Like don't do that. I think that I think that I think there is absolutely an element of performance to it. But if it's if it's just that, it's completely empty. And and I think anybody who's there'll be people who enjoy it in the moment, but I actually don't even think that does much to move the needle with anybody in the long run, because you're not going to make any points that are really going to stick with anybody. It's just kind of like it's just whatever. I mean, it's just ideological fast food, right? You eat it and it's gone, right? But I think that you also can't go all the way to the other end, or it's going to be so boring to watch that it's also not going to sink in with anybody, right? I mean, I think there's I think there's a happy medium. I think that the things that and it didn't really come up in this debate because Lindsey Graham,
well, he wasn't debating at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
He was giving a sermon.
Exactly, right. So it didn't matter because Lindsey Graham was just giving a sermon. But I think that the thing that's like sometimes a weakness with Bernie is that he'll do, is the flip side of one of the things that's the best about Bernie, which is that he's so on message, right? He's so disciplined about saying what he came to say, right? Which is fantastic, right? I love that. Like, I think like 99% of leftists should be more like that, right? And Bernie should be like, sometimes Bernie should be like 5% less like that, that like, because like sometimes like, somebody says something and he just like, I don't know, break up the big bangs, right? It's like, well, you didn't really respond to what they said, right? You could go a little further in that, you could be slightly less message disciplined and you could benefit from it, right? Like in terms of sort of rolling with the punches. So that would be my sometimes criticism of Bernie. But honestly, like, again, I should be more message disciplined. Most leftists should be more message disciplined. Like, I think even if he sometimes overdoes it, I think Bernie's still a good model that everybody should try to be more like.
Yeah, one of the things I've always liked about Bernie is you can actually look up when he was mayor of Burlington. Like you can look this up. Like he had a cable access show where he just went and talked with people. And one of my favorite moments in that actually was there's this whole bit where he's talking to like two goths he found at the mall.
I remember that.
Yeah, which are like people I'm very well acquainted with. I have some fans in the goth movement. I work with like Crusados, which is a phenomenal goth dark wave electropop band. And like what I love about that bit and you got to remember, this is the 90s. This is when everybody thinks that like goths are potential school shooters because they blamed Columbine on trench coats as opposed to, one of the shooters' explicit white supremacist beliefs. But Bernie is sitting there and he takes the two goth kids seriously. He takes their questions well, and he listens. And I think that that's one of the most important things about a politician, but also just about communicating with people who have different ideas from you. I found, and I took a cue from you on this, in certain debates in particular, I've been, I guess, less aggressive, less going for the obvious dunking on someone and trying to take them seriously, because it seems like their audience takes you more seriously if you're in a mindset where you want to have a real discussion and it's obvious, instead of a mindset where you want to be a soldier for your cause,
No, I think that's right. And I think that you can, and I think you could vary it up a little bit with context, right? That I don't know if you saw that thing I did in Texas. When was that? It was like a few months ago. Or no, it was more than that. It was, it was like April, right? I did in April in Texas, the Better Discourse thing, where I think I let myself be a lot more openly contemptuous of the other people on stage than I normally would be, right? But that was, and part of that was just a sort of visceral reaction to the craziness, but also part of it was just that I don't know. I think somehow my read of the situation is this is the best thing to do here, right? let's just go for it.
Yeah, you got to bring the claws out sometimes.
But I think I think in most cases, look, most people who are going to, the mistake that the mistake that leftists who don't like debates, they say you're platforming people, whatever, make, is that they assume that everybody who watches some right-wing figure is a hardcore unpersuadable fan, right? That's silly. But at the same time, most people who watch Charlie Kirk or whoever basically, start out somewhat sympathetic to Charlie Kirk, right? I mean, that they're probably, some people are hate watching or whatever, of course, you're going to get that, right? But by and large, right, there are people who are willing to give him a sympathetic hearing. They don't start out hating him, right? So if you're coming from a place of I hate you and you suck and you should die, right? You're probably not going to reach those people as
and
well and
we've got to talk to people. There's got to be a dialogue, specifically because the alternative to talking to people is fighting.
No, exactly. And you can't fight with, there's a limit to how many people you can fight with at the same time. And you want to get everybody on board that you can possibly get on board. And I think there's also a way that you can be pretty vicious towards the ideas that somebody is expressing without being vicious towards them. I mean, it's a tightrope, but I think it's possible, to do that, to be polite as you're saying it, but also be none of this makes any kind of sense at all. Here's why not, right? I mean, I think there's a tricky balance to pull it off. I think that can be done, and I think that's often the approach that whoever is persuadable in the audience is most likely to go for. All right, this is super interesting.
There was one thing I did want to mention beforehand, because we at the beginning of the debate, you talked about Tim Pool. And I didn't want to get immediately hijack your debate into Tim Pool. But Tim and I have known each other for years. He will show up on my wall on occasion and say stuff. We argue, we disagree. There is an element of the fact that the hardest thing for me seeing of Tim was when police were black bagging protesters in like Seattle,
Uh.
and he sort of took the position, and I've told him about this, I believe, that he took the position that they were right to be doing that. And I'm like, we were in the street. How can you possibly believe this at this point? I think with Tim, I would recommend, and I'll send it to you, there's a short clip of him on David Pakman that I saw recently.
Yeah.
He is not the bad faith actor that some people on the left think he is. While he is definitely not a centrist like he thinks he is, I would say that he is someone that you can communicate with, or at least I've been able to do it. I would say looking at that debate, I think you may be able to reach him, if not the other two people, to one extent or another. But yeah, I feel like what's so weird about the don't debate these people, don't talk to these people leftists. One, it's kind of like a really Puritan way of looking at things, like their evil is going to rub off on you. But also, guys, dialectics. Like, if you meet somebody who has a different perspective from you, and instead of fighting, you actually talk it out and you try to see the humanity in both of you. Even they almost definitely will not agree with you, because people don't make decisions based upon hearing the right argument. But those arguments that you have, if the proper circumstances in their lives wind up, you wind up affecting them and moving them like in a better direction. So like people that, people have come up to me and been like, well, why do you continue to talk to Tim Pool? And it's because if everyone who has a decent take on something abandons Tim Pool, like, where do you think his takes are going to go? Whereas, he's probably not going to agree with what I say, because like I said, we've been arguing with each other for years. But you can affect a person's outlook in a positive way, I guess, softly, instead of by slinging rhetoric at them. And I do hope I think maybe in a way that's the positive thing about Bernie's response to Graham, where Graham was coming at the whole situation from a very angry position. But yeah, so I would say I'm looking forward to seeing this debate with you and three crazy people. Yeah, and that's all right. Well, I limp myself in with crazy people. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all makes sense. I mean, I think, Tim Pool is, I think it is a little bit of a shame, because I think the event on Saturday isn't probably going to get into this. The argument I'd really like to have with him about is actually about about socialism, right? Because in the episode on Monday, we watched a clip of Tim on Rogan, where he's sort of saying why he doesn't like socialism, and it's
not socialism.
It's not socialism, right? I mean, like what he's expressing, and I'm not saying this in like a mean way or like a dunking way. I just think it's like literally true, right? I mean, that like I just don't think he gets, like, on a really fundamental level, I don't think he gets where socialists are coming from, right? Because like all the stuff he was talking about was like upward mobility, like, oh, socialists don't think people move up, but they can. It's like, well, that has nothing to do with anything, right? I mean, like that's the the whole point of socialism is that you don't think upward mobility is good enough, right? I mean, like if you think that you're not just like concerned about meritocratic fairness for people moving up the ladder, right? You object to the whole structure, right? That's you're concerned about all the people who won't move up the ladder. That's I think that's like a really basic distinction. It's kind of lost there.
That'd be a good debate for you guys to have, to tell you the truth. I'd love to see you talk to Tim about that. So who knows? Maybe after this one.
I mean, the person who I think is the most like Tim. Like I just disagree with about a ton. I mean, I think that he's, I think that I think the whole, I mean, I watched his video about why he's voting for Trump, and and like, you know, people could go look that up, and, you know, you'll get a sense of how deep some of the disagreements go, right? You know, but I think, you know, and then Tulsi, I just have a hard time getting a read on. Like, she just seems so weird now. But then,
yeah, if I'm not mistaken, by the way, Tulsi was like raised in a cult of some kind. Like, like, I mean, allegedly. Look that up, but there is some media out on that.
yeah, I know she came from some kind of conservative religious background. I don't know if it's literally a cult, but yeah, I mean, maybe I just don't know. But but then, like, you know, then like James O'Keefe strikes me as the person of the three of them who is the most
disingenuous.
Like, well, that too, you know, but also just the most purely a ideological enemy, right? Because he's like, we watched the episode on Monday. We watched these clips from this series of videos that he did in the early days of Project Veritas. That are well, you can tell how long ago it is because of the cultural reference, but it's called "Teachers Unions Going Wild," and and it's like he's like taking hidden cameras into the New Jersey Teachers Union convention and like exposing them because they're swearing and smoking pot and saying bad nasty things about Governor Christie, and you know,
when,
that's
by the way, no one should ever say anything other than something nasty about Chris Christie. But
so I think that you know, I think that, like, Tulsi seems like, you know, she had a good moment in 2016, and then I think her presidential bid in 2020, I'm obviously not a fan of, but it also seems like since 2020 she's repositioned herself in this way where, like, I'm sure that, I mean, I don't think her positions are actually that great for the most part, like, but she has, I'm sure she has lots of positions that are, you know, like at least regular Democrat kinds of positions, maybe even to the left of that, especially in foreign policy. Some of it's to the left of that, but like it just seems like she's really repositioned herself in this way that, like, she's tried very hard to appeal to, you know, Team Red in the culture war, right? I mean, like, I watched her debate at CPAC, or not her debate, her speech at CPAC, and the joke I made on the show on Monday is I said, okay, I've got a clip of Tulsi at CPAC, and we just played the Simpsons Halloween episode clip about, you know, twirling towards freedom, right? You know, because that's what it reminded me of. But like,
we must go forwards, not backwards, upwards, not forwards, and always twirling towards freedom.
Exactly. Yeah. And most of it was like that, but there was also a lot of pandering to the right of there, right? So, you know, I don't know exactly where her political position is now, but I certainly don't like her political positioning.
I would agree with that. I sort of knew she was kind of going off the rails when, like, some of the alt-right adjacent people that I know, like, suddenly were big, like, Tulsi Gabbard fans, and I was just like, oh my God, really? Like, it's important to do outreach and to speak to people, but you also don't want to reinforce someone's delusions if it would cause them to act in a bad way, or conceivably cause them to act in a bad way. And you also, I don't think it's necessarily ethical to, you know, to buy into some of those narratives. So, you know, we'll see. I mean, she did used to be she did used to be a Democrat. And I remember there was a period when she was first kind of coming out and becoming a nationally recognized figure that I thought she had some really good takes. I think I'll also say that and I think this actually goes back to, of all things, like Christianity, and the fact that, you know, in modern Protestant Christianity, the just are saved through faith, not works. I think that cultural tendency, and I called it Puritanism or whatever, kind of carries over onto the left, even when the left are a bunch of atheists or whatever. there's this idea that everybody always has to have the right idea and the right take, and nobody can have a bad take. And I'm going to tell you, myself included, definitely myself included, everybody has a bad take. And what's more important is what you actually do than what you think, or at least that's the Buddhist in me. The practice is more important than the thought.
No, I mean, I think that's right. At the very least, you can go Catholic on and say faith and works, right? But I think that's right. I mean, I think that lots of people are wrong about lots of stuff. It's incredibly counterproductive to shun, to respond to that with shut in. I think, there's a lot you could say about what the left gets wrong about that. I, in fact, often think of like 3 years ago. I think one of the first times Adolf Reed was on TMBS, he just had this like beautiful little line, especially because Reed is, well, I'm pretty sure he's an atheist, but like, let's put it this way, he's definitely a Catholic atheist, right? I think he actually, actually sent his son Toure to Catholic school, despite not believing in any of it, just because it's like, whatever, it's what you do, it's a tradition, But he said they were talking about like left moralism, and kind of like canceling and all that on the in the interview with Michael, and he said, and Reed just in his like laconic Adolf Reed style was like, yeah. All this stuff just seems to be, it just seems to be all about like trying to figure out who's going to heaven, who's going to hell. It's just too Protestant an approach to politics for me, which is
nice,
which is a thing of beauty. But we are at 11. We got to go. Brett, you want to plug what you got to plug?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. So, hey, everybody. If this is your first time meeting me, my name is Brent Lengel. I am a poet, playwright, Appalachian Trail 2000 miler, and I'm a comic author of Snow White Zombie Apocalypse, which the first trade just got funded a couple months ago. I'm in the process of making it. And also Daruti, Shadow of the People. That's this behind me. A semi-biographical comic about the life and death of anarchist Buenaventura Durruti, who defeated the military in Barcelona and, collectivized the entire city and ran it under an anarchist model for several years. George Orwell wrote about it. I'm going to be at Capcom or CapCon in Michigan, July 8th to the 10th. I'll be there with my publisher, Scout Comics. I'm going to be at Dragon Con coming up over the Labor Day weekend. And I will also be at Cincinnati Comic Expo in September. If you guys are into comics and you're into talking about politics or philosophy or whatever, go check that out. If you can, check out my YouTube. Just Google my name, Brent Lengel. You'll find my YouTube channel where I talk about Buddhism, politics, art, and I debate a bunch of weirdos on the far right, and occasionally break down the debates with Ben because he's such a gracious interlocutor. And Ben, thank you for having me on with this. This was a joy, and I think you and I haven't talked for a couple of months, so it was nice.
Yeah, it's been a little bit. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, this was great. So, all right, sounds good. I am anybody who wants to see me, play out that, okay, go back to the Mega Day thing. It's like I'm describing a dream. I'm on stage with Tim Pool, Tulsi Gabbard, and James O'Keefe. Anybody who wants to actually.
Yeah, I'm on stage with Tim Pool, James O'Keefe, Tulsi Gabbard, and there's this giant purple unicorn, and he's telling me that I'm going to go to jail because I hopped the turnstile in the New York subway.
Yeah, exactly. So anybody who wants to actually see that three-dimensionally, say hi. I'll sign a book or two. We could. I will see you there on Saturday. I should not neglect that on Sunday. So Saturdays at the Beacon Theater in Manhattan. On Sunday in Brooklyn, there is the Norman Finkelstein book launch that's been co-hosted by the This Is Revolution podcast. I'm going to be on a panel on that too. So could also happy to say hi to people there. But with that, we really are going to knock it off for tonight. Thanks again, Brent, for coming on.
Absolutely. Solidarity.
See ya.